Ms. Clerk, are you ready? Good morning, members of Regional Council and guests from the Durham Regional Police Services Board. The purpose of today's special meeting is to receive training and education on Durham Regional Police Services 10-year service and financial strategy. A joint presentation has been prepared by staff from both the region and DRPS. It is an opportunity to receive information and ask questions and discuss significant investments that DRPS plans to make over the next 10 years. There are no decisions being made at today's special meeting, and a regional report on strategy will be presented to the Finance and Administration Committee at its May 12th meeting. With us today are members of the Durham Regional Police Services Board who have been invited to participate in this meeting. They will receive the same information and have the same opportunity to discuss the strategies alongside regional council members. Mr. Clerk, I'm going to ask you to perform a roll call, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Electronic roll call is starting now.
Okay. We have quorum. Declarations of interest, members of council. Mr. Clerk, if this meeting goes past noon, I have to leave. So the Mayor Watton is in the room, so I will ask her to take the chair as it is. She is still in the role. Let's make sure that congratulations on the promotion. It ends in November. Before we begin the presentation, Councillor Chapman, I'll need a motion to suspend the rules to allow DRPS board members the right to ask questions and participate in the discussion at today's meeting. You'd move that? Thank you. Mayor Foster, thank you for seconding that. I'm going to call the vote. Cameras aren't on, Mr. Clerk, for the people that are participating remotely, so I'm going to ask you to turn your cameras on so I can see your hands. No, it's okay. I just need to see hands. All those in favor? In opposition? Seeing none. So we just, next, Mr. Clerk, is education and training would be our CAO. Go ahead, Lillian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here today. I wanted to start by welcoming the Chief, members of the Police Services Board, and members of Regional Council to today's education session, and thank you to Chair Henry for sharing the goals of today's event. I'd like to also extend a sincere thank you to Teresa Feder and Nicole Pincombe and Alison Burgess, as they were intricately involved with their teams in developing what is before you today. We have worked extremely hard to bring this material forward. This has been a complex exercise, and the effort and collaboration to get us to today is appreciated. Before we begin the presentation, I want to take a few minutes to set the context for today's discussion and speak about governance and how we've prepared the information before you today. Excuse me. The first part of the presentation will be delivered by Chief Moriera and his team and will focus on the needs of DRPS. The expenses have been determined by the Chief and his leadership team based on their assessment of the resources required to effectively operate policing service in Durham Region. Under provincial legislation, the Durham Region Police Services Board is responsible for determining the expenses required to deliver policing, and that role has been respected throughout this process. In a future meeting, if Regional Council directs us, I would be happy to work with the Chief and DRPS team to find efficiencies through collaborative shared services. The second part of the presentation was completed by the Commissioner of Finance, Nicole Pincombe, and her team. Their role was taking the policing expenses identified by the Chief and develop the financing strategy that will be presented to you today. Importantly, this work looks at how these costs could be funded within the broader regional financial framework and in the context of Council's fiscal priorities. As part of today's sessions, there are two areas where we haven't reached common ground and that will be discussed. Both of these areas are rooted squarely in governance. The first relates to how this work moves forward following today's session. After today, there will be 2 reports brought forward. One report to the Police Services Board, who are responsible for reviewing budget submissions, deliberating on expenses, and approving operating and capital budget estimates to be forwarded to Regional Council for review and approval. And one staff report to the Region's Finance and Administration Committee, who are responsible for approved budgets recommending financing strategies, tax rates, and recommending municipal financial policy to Regional Council. The staff report to the Finance and Admin Committee recommends that this strategy be received for information, and this report will be released to the public today on the agenda. That recommendation is very intentionally grounded in governance and council direction. This council has been clear and consistent in stating 2 priorities: providing strong, effective services to the community, and doing so while keeping property taxes affordable for residents. At this point, we are very close to a municipal election, and we are also facing significant uncertainty related to Bill 100 and the likely appointment of a chair with strong chair powers, particularly as they relate to the budget process and authorities. Given that the increases in the tax levy to cover the police services expenses and the uncertainty about how the budget process will proceed for 2027, we have not recommended that Council endorse a long-term financing strategy at this time. We know the composition and priorities of the Council may change following the municipal election. Instead, staff have recommended that Council receive this strategy for information, allowing this Council and the NICS to be fully informed of policing needs and financial implications. Once there is greater clarity around strong chair budget authorities, and once the municipal election has concluded, this information can be appropriately incorporated into the 2027 and future budget processes. The second area still to be resolved relates to reserve funds. Reserve funds are a financing tool that provides flexibility across all regionally funded services. From a governance perspective, staff want to ensure that Regional Council retains the ability to determine level and source of funding of expenditures across the full range of services it is responsible for. For that reason, staff have not recommended a service-specific police reserve fund be established. To be clear, this does not mean that the reserve funds will not be used for supporting police costs. Nicole will go through the financing strategy that includes drawing more than $40 million from reserves. By using established reserve funds, this approach maintains Council's authority and flexibility in making funding decisions across the organization as a whole. I expect today's discussion to be thoughtful and constructive, and I believe it will be a valuable opportunity for our shared understanding. With that, I will now turn it over to the Chief to begin his presentation. Chief?
My apologies. I thought Nicole was going first, but all right. Good morning, everyone, and I appreciate the opportunity to address all of you. I want to start off here just grounding our conversations in some important legislative and procedural groundings. The Durham Regional Police Service is operating in a fundamentally transformed policing environment. This transformation is being driven by several converging pressures around the implementation of Ontario's Community Safety and Policing Act, or CSPA. Unprecedented population growth across Durham Region, increased complexity of calls for service, and significantly expanded legislative, operational, and infrastructure requirements. Together, these factors have permanently changed how policing must be delivered and funded. For DRPS, these new requirements need to be met against the backdrop of austerity budgets, under-resourcing, and staffing, which we are trying to make up for. At the center of this shift is the Community Safety and Policing Act. The CSPA fundamentally redefines accountability for policing in Ontario. It assigns responsibility for adequate and effective policing directly to the Police Services Board, supported by prescriptive provincial standards and strengthened oversight from the Inspector General of Policing, something that is new. Compliance is mandatory and ongoing. Municipal police service boards are legally responsible for governance and oversight, ensuring the service has the capacity, resources, and policy requirements to meet its legislative mandates and ensure that the police budget is sufficient to support the delivery of all legislative functions, all of them. Compliance under this framework is not optional, and more importantly, it is not static. It requires sustained and ongoing investments in staffing, facilities, technology, training, governance, and oversight. This has effectively established a new unavoidable baseline cost for policing. Our legislative mandate under the CSPA is clear. Under Section 11 of the Act and Ontario Regulation 392 for 23, adequate and effective policing must include the delivery of the following required core policing functions: crime prevention, law enforcement, maintaining the public peace, emergency response, assistance to victims of crime, and any other additional policing functions prescribed by regulation, training, or facilities requirements. Within each category is a cascading number of mandates. These are mandatory baseline functions, and they are not discretionary or aspirational. Beyond defining what must be delivered, the CSPA also prescribes how policing must be carried out. Each core policing function is governed by legislative standards and procedures, including requirements related to supervision and command, operational capabilities, required equipment, resources and facilities, emergency and extreme incident planning, quality assurance, and compliance with written procedures. These standards are significantly elevated expectations for consistency, documentation, oversight, and accountability across all of those policing functions. In short, the CSPA, under the CSPA, adequate and effective policing is not only an operational responsibility, it's a legislative mandate. Next slide, please. To deliver on the CSPA requirements, thank you. DRPS must remain focused on ensuring adequate staffing, capital investments in facilities and equipment, and modernizing policing through the integration of technology and innovation. This presentation presents a comprehensive, data-driven, multi-year service strategy focused on sustaining officer and civilian staffing growth, major capital investments required to address aging and woefully inadequate facilities, and I want you to remember this, I'm going to get back to it, technology for internal systems and emerging investigative tools to combat criminal use of AI as just one example, and enhanced governance, wellness, and equity outcomes, and risk mitigation through reserves and proactive compliance. Without decisive front-loaded investment, the service faces escalating risks to public safety, CSPA compliance, our future financial stability, and community trust. At the same time, Durham is experiencing rapid population growth and increased urban density. Durham's population is projected to grow by 33.5% to 1.3 million by no later than 2051. This growth is concentrated in high-density urban areas, which generates exponential service demands. As a result, we are seeing longer response times and at-scene times, more officers required to respond to an incident, and increased call complexity. This has had a massive operational impact, not only on resourcing, but also on ensuring our officers have the right training to respond effectively. And I want to speak more about training and its importance. We are seeing unprecedented trends, and we project that we will see the greatest increase in the age cohorts of 15 to 29. And you know, if you go from 29 to 34, we are just slightly below Halton in just those few years there. That's where our growth is coming from. And this also happens to be the cohort that disproportionately is represented in offending, victimization, and mental health apprehensions. We have seen more than 20% increase in mental health apprehensions in 2025 alone. Of those, the vast majority, over 50% of them, were people in the age cohort of 15 to 29, which has to be notable. Additionally, in 2025, children up to the age of 17 account for 65 of all missing persons cases, and despite our resource challenges, we have made it a priority, dedicating frontline and investigative resources and placing a high priority on finding people. And we do it with a great deal of success. On average, a missing person from this age cohort is returned in 1.3 days. Since the start of my tenure in 2023, 283 officers have been added or will be added by the end of this year. However, this came only after the 4 previous years when only 78 officers were added. And more importantly, between 2010 and 2021, a 12-year period, DRPS added 59 net new positions. That's about 5 per year. And that growth wasn't consistent. From 2011 to 2017, no net new positions were added. In fact, in 2021, the service lost 2 positions, resulting in an overall decline. For many years, DRPS didn't receive enough funding to even sustain our baseline operations, which should have been the absolute bare minimum. By comparison, the region of Durham between 2016 and 2021, just that 5-year gap in that same time, added 320 new positions outside of policing for an average of 53 per year. To be clear, during that same period, investments were directed to other regional services in response to growing pressure demands, pressures from which the DRPS was not immune, yet comparable investments in the DRPS were not made. Years of underfunding and limited resource allocation to DRPS have created periods of stagnation that does not reflect the service's current operational realities. Ensuring public safety in one of Ontario's fastest growing regions requires deliberate and sustained investments. Policing is often viewed differently because it represents a significant portion of the property tax levy, but costs should not be mistaken for growth. Over the last 15 years, the DRPS has never ranked higher than 3rd amongst all of the gross budgets of all regional services. Unlike other services such as transportation, health, and social services, we do not have access to other funding streams. We have worked with the province and secured time-limited grant funding for special projects or one-off needs like our helicopter. However, for operational capital needs, we do not have this option. And fundamentally, this is a core responsibility of this municipality to fund. Over the next 10 years, we require a total of 789 full-time equivalents to meet the region's growth and needs. Approximately 480 frontline officers, 193 investigative officers, and 116 specialized civilian support staff. We are shifting towards a higher civilian ratio to support capacity and enhancements to areas such as our digital evidence, cybercrime, analytics, wellness, finance, IT, facilities, communications, and governance and compliance. These represent the minimum staffing levels required to keep pace with the emerging threats, population growth, density intensification, and associated service demands. But this growth is not linear. It is exponential when these factors converge. Meeting these staffing challenges, targets will be challenging, particularly given the following. We've had historical underinvestments in the DRPS, and we're entering this rapid growth period from a weakened staff line base. Provincial-wide recruitment and retention challenges are shrinking the application pool. Policing is just not seen as an alternative in a career. Expanding mandatory training requirements reduce frontline availability. And there are also inefficiencies with our training because facilities that we use for training are scattered across the region, and we are losing valuable time when multiple locations are needed to be visited just to complete that training. Just imagine the time lost, the FTE equivalents throughout a year just to complete the mandatory training that we need because our facilities aren't co-located and don't meet our needs. Persistent gaps between authorized and actual staffing, which in managing increased WSIB, PTSD-related absences, which is the consequence of being in this line of work. The experiences of trauma will have an undeniable impact on our people. Wellness initiatives, however, are showing great success. More officers are returning to work despite our limited resources. More than any of our neighboring comparators. Last year, in fact, 158 members returned to work. Since 2019, response times have risen across all priorities, with routine response showing the largest increase by 54.5%, while emergency at-scene times nearly doubled to 99.2%. And this reflects a large common trend amongst all major police services. In 2025, we saw the greatest on-scene time increase by 24 minutes on average, a 25% increase, with the greatest amount of time allocated for cases that have been a priority for every municipal council and this room here as well. Things like intimate partner violence and sexual assault. Our most vulnerable are taking up more of our time, and it's right to do so. We're also seeing new trends in frauds, and in 2025 alone, there were over $58 million in losses in frauds in this region. These scams are often online, use untraceable mechanisms, and take an incredible amount of resources and coordination to investigate. We've also seen significant changes in court disclosure requirements. For those of you who aren't familiar with what disclosure is, this is the mandatory release of all evidence, notes, records, videos, witness statements, and forensic evidence. And it's not just in the most serious cases, it's in every case. And all of it must be vetted and redacted so that personal information that is not lawfully allowed to be shared is not. Failure to do this results in charges being pulled by the Crown, which means no accountability for offenders and no justice for victims. Certainly not what we want. Previously, officers had months to complete disclosure. It was later reduced to 21 days, and now it's 14 days. This places a tremendous pressure on officers to ensure that they have adequately collected and cataloged evidence for disclosure in an incredibly short runway, contributing to increased time on scene. I remind you, this is not a DRPS phenomenon. It's happening province-wide. This is why our emphasis has to be on strategic expansion of our criminal investigations bureaus to allow investigators to take over and allow frontline officers to get back to responding to calls. This is a very narrow snapshot of what is affecting our staffing, and I will share more about these pressures at future updates before you. Turning to our facilities. DRPS facilities have had an average of approximately average age is approximately 25 years, with Central East being the oldest. The facility has had significant number of deficiencies and continues to have, requiring leased off-site parking for members and presents ongoing security challenges. These risks are real and immediate. Recently, 2 officers were violently attacked in the rear parking lot by an emotionally disturbed individual. The officers returning to the station, exhausted from seizing a firearm from another offender following a foot pursuit, were required to fight with an individual in the back lot, and they deployed their use of force options to gain control of the violent man who was just loitering in the back lot of their station. Fortunately, these officers were on duty and therefore had their use of force options available when the sudden unprovoked attack occurred. The outcome could have been significantly more serious had this occurred at the end of their 12-hour shift when members are off duty, unarmed, and routinely walking alone to off-site parking. The most recent incident of this is the most recent incident at this site. This underscores the persistent safety risks associated with the facility, risks faced daily by our members simply arriving or leaving work. Imagine this happening to one of our civilian staff or to a member of the public attending our buildings. There are no viable long-term solutions for this building or site. We keep investing money and we keep having the exact same problems. To provide context, this facility opened before the CN Tower ever welcomed its first guest, and it should have been replaced more than a decade ago. Most facilities, except for the Bowmanville-Clarington division, are nearing the end of their lifespan and present serious deteriorating infrastructure risks and extremely costly maintenance and upgrade costs. The condition of our facilities where our members work and where the public comes to seeking help is simply inadequate, and the issues are reoccurring no matter how many attempts at repair. I'm going to show you a video here. This is our gym at 18 Division, a 22-year-old building. Our gyms are an invaluable physical and mental health investment found throughout our frontline facilities. However, this video depicts water suddenly pouring through the light box in the ceiling, a familiar issue for officers in this division. It is one of the many examples of deterioration across our divisions, and we are experiencing basic infrastructure failures, including sewage issues backing up in our shower facilities right across this region. In contrast, our North Division often runs out of water and of potable water. This impacts a variety of things, including toilet use and the ability to shower. Imagine using the gym before your shift, but the station runs out of water before you have an opportunity to take your shower. And so you must then put on your uniform and go work your 12 hours. Or the need to shower because you've attended a particularly contaminated scene, but when your station doesn't have any water, it means you have to go back to your station, pick up your clothes and a towel and all your stuff, and take it to another police facility so you can have a shower to decontaminate yourself. Our Pickering Division was built on a floodplain and cannot be expanded. Our members are rightfully affected by these conditions, and our associations are paying close attention to these issues and letting us know how grave a concern the state of our buildings have become and the negative impacts it has. And in fact, just behind me here is the vice president of the association and two of the directors. They have reached out to both myself and the board, outlining these in writing. And they're here to monitor what we're doing. For a service that is focused on our members' wellness, this certainly does not reflect care. Our Education Training Center, or ETC, is currently located at the end of a strip mall. It is not a secure facility. In fact, one of our members was violently attacked returning to her car following a full day of training. With the increased training and requalification requirements under the CSPA, we may soon have no option but to rely on temporary portable classrooms. This is neither sustainable nor appropriate as a long-term solution. Quite honestly, it's embarrassing. An embarrassing moment for our service, particularly when you consider we are no closer to our capital plan, even when you consider that we've been here now for 3 budgets, presenting the exact same plan and looking to work with the region to move it forward. Demand continues to grow, yet we are already operating beyond capacity both at the ETC and across many of our divisions. The reality is that our current facilities cannot accommodate the size of our recruit classes, the mandatory training requirements, and all other specialized training we must deliver. This has been well documented, and the region has been very aware of the challenges for years, if not for over a decade, as budget and capital planning documents have repeatedly shown the need for an expanded training facility. Phase 2 of the training facility in Whitby was in the service's 2009 to 2018 capital plan and was planned to be built in 2014-15 year to align with the expiry of the Durham College lease. Remember that. I'm going to show you something in a minute. However, this was consistently deferred by Durham Region Council, and now we have reached the absolute tipping point, and we are assessing portables as an option. Imagine that. Just for context, the facility development for DRPS has been repeatedly delayed for a long time. The firing range closed in 1988. It was located in the basement of the Oshawa Station and was shut down for health and safety reasons. It was not until 2013, 5 years later, did our range actually open. So for 5 years, we had people, and at a great cost to the service and to the taxpayers, shuttling from one private range to another just to accommodate training. The number of full-time equivalent hours lost just to comply with mandatory training is staggering. As the 5th largest police service in this province and the 10th largest in this country, this is not the standard of infrastructure that should support our operations and presents a major obstacle to our recruit and training efforts. Next slide. I want to take this opportunity to highlight what DRPS could potentially build, drawing from what the Ottawa Police Service is currently developing. CTV News featured this initiative, this news story here, just 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. As you watch, I encourage you to focus closely on the remarks by the Police Service Board Chair and the Deputy Chief. Each time you hear Ottawa Police, think Durham Police. And each time you hear Algonquin College, think Durham College. Please play the video.
The Ottawa Police Service is looking for somewhere to train new recruits after Algonquin College told them They can no longer use spaces at the school. The plan is to build a training center in the city's south end, but it will cost more than $200 million. The facility would be located at 3505 Prince of Wales Drive, directly beside the new Barrhaven Police Station. CTV's Dylan Dyson has the details.
This site, almost 16 acres in size, could be home to the Ottawa Police Service's new South End campus and training facility.
There are a number of facilities being used throughout the city, and they're scattered, and it's inefficient training for the police service. So the idea is to bring training all under one roof.
A report for Monday's Police Services Board meeting recommends the approval of a $233 million professional development center at the site of the new police station in Barrhaven on Prince of Wales Drive.
You're going to have a gun range, you're going to have classrooms, dynamic simulation labs, you're going to have a place for us to do our CEW training. So all of our required CSPA training, Community Safety and Policing Act training, as well as all of our other specialty training, like our investigative training, training for our special constables.
The cost is very high, in particular because of the specialized nature of the infrastructure that would be required for the fire range, for motor vehicle training, etc.
The Ottawa Police currently have 8 training facilities scattered across the city, most notably Algonquin College's firing range. But in 2024, the college issued notice to the Ottawa Police that it could no longer use the range by March 2033.
The facilities that we're losing at Algonquin, it is disappointing. I think we had all hoped that we would have continued that relationship, and I think it did make sense, especially with the police training that the college provides.
The Ottawa Police say a new training center is vital as a critical period looms for the city's police force.
We know that we're going into, like most places, a retirement bubble where we're seeing lots of people leave. So as people leave, we need to bring them on. Bring new officers on. We also know that we're a growing city.
If approved by the board, the project will begin this spring, with construction expected to be complete in 2031. Dylan Dyson, CTV News.
The parallels are disturbing and striking. This news report is from 2 weeks ago. They know that their lease with the college is ending, like we knew it was ending. Ottawa chose to do something about it. We are facing the exact same challenges, namely fragmented facilities and a lack of purpose-built environments, and we lack a centralized facility with specialized infrastructure required to support a modern policing training. And this includes a compliant and properly equipped firing range, dedicated classroom space for all the courses that we need to run, scenario-based simulation environments, and a motor vehicle training area. Without these elements, it is increasingly difficult to consistently and effectively deliver on our mandated CSPA training and requalification standards to our officers, civilian staff, auxiliary officers, and our special constables. At the same time, we are managing similar workforce pressures like Ottawa. We are confronting a retirement wave while advancing ambitious recruiting targets to keep pace with rapid regional growth. More than ever, training is going to be central to the success of this organization. Fragmented facilities do not adequately support the requirements of the CSPA, meet the expectations of our communities, or prepare our members to deliver service that is both modern and responsive. The Ottawa Police Service Board Chair identified the same thing. The reality is that the DRPS current infrastructure was not designed to support today's scale or future demands. This limits our ability to expand safely, efficiently, and effectively. Since I've been here, I have insisted that the region working with me to move this forward. And 3 years later, we're only here now before you right now, and this is just for information. And I'm both frustrated and disappointed. Immediate action is needed to continue to deliver adequate and effective policing in a rapidly growing region like ours. Means the DRPS requires new purpose-built police campus, one like Ottawa, one that aligns with the evolving legislation, operational, community expectations, and most importantly, our future needs, so we're not back here doing the same thing. Many of our existing facilities were built decades ago and no longer meet current operational, safety, or specialized requirements. Today, our operations and specialized units are dispersed across multiple aging facilities. This fragmentation creates significant inefficiencies, increases maintenance costs, and limits coordination and collaboration across the organization, and puts us at a significant security risk. A consolidated DRPS campus would bring together critical functions in one integrated modern environment, including education, training, and professional development, an Oshawa Police Division to replace the current one we have, a purpose-built police headquarters. We're the only jurisdiction in this province that doesn't have a standalone police headquarters, one that meets the needs of in a place to gather with the community, a secure IT and records area, and a dedicated community engagement space to support meaningful and accessible interactions with our residents. This integrated approach would improve coordination, communication, response times, and response across the organization, enable us to meet modern operational standards and technology, enable policing requirements under the CSPA, support consistent delivery of training and professional development, reduce long-term infrastructure and operating costs by eliminating duplicities and inefficiencies. Ultimately, this is about building the infrastructure required to support the future of policing in Durham Region, ensuring our people have the space, tools, and environment they need to serve the community safely, effectively, and to the highest standards. Not to mention the millions and millions of dollars every year that we pay in leases. It's staggering. Facilities are not the only capital need we have. When it comes to policing, many do not think about the resources and technologies that we need 24/7 until they or a loved one needs them. Technology and innovation are critical to modern policing and need to be appropriately invested in, including in AI advancements. These are not things that we can just order online. They require investment in time, assessment, testing, compliance, and implementation, as well as time to ensure that they are ready when they're needed and that we have properly trained people to use them. While we continue to invest in education, training, and requalification, it is equally important to invest in the right technologies that drive efficiencies, particularly during critical response situations. These tools enhance our ability to locate missing persons, identify and apprehend suspects, and ultimately provide overall improved community safety. As technology continues to evolve, particularly with the rapid advancements of artificial intelligence, we must remain adaptable and thoughtful in how we assess and adopt these tools. Not every technology will be appropriate for policing, which is why this is a critical point in time. And we must carefully evaluate emerging solutions and identify those that best support our operational needs. Ethical standards, and perhaps most important of all, is the community's expectations. Ensuring that technology is compatible with our operations is a critical part of this work, which requires investment in properly identifying, testing, and piloting new technologies and phases, allowing us to address challenges early and make informed data-driven decisions. This requires investment. Strong governance and clear safeguards are essential throughout this process. We must ensure that we are not only integrating the right technologies, but doing so responsibly, minimizing risk and avoiding unintended or harmful consequences. One of these areas, and we're proud of this, we're in the final stages of piloting our drone as a first responder program and look forward to expanding it further. This program has already proved highly effective, particularly in locating missing persons. We also recently launched the Community Safety Data Portal, which provides the public with access to near real-time data. This enhances our transparency, builds broader understanding of crime trends, and allows us to share greater insight into how we are responding to emerging issues across our community and how we're making use of the resources that we have. Many members of council have seen firsthand how effective these technologies are deployed and the positive outcomes from their use. DRPS needs to continue to make meaningful investments in tech and innovation to optimize responsiveness and leverage it to enhance community safety. The expansion of our body-worn cameras, automated license plate readers, and our real-time operations center will be our immediate focus. We are also require critical investments in our cloud storage, AI-assisted redacting systems, and cybersecurity to ensure our data and sensitive materials remains protected. Additionally, a modern enterprise resource planning system, and an enterprise asset management system are critical for governance and CSPA compliance. DRPS is at a critical juncture. The next step and responsibility for what we do and where we head falls to all of you, our elected officials. While there's been plenty to discuss even before my arrival, the moment now calls for action and investment. We must start this year or we face significant financial implications. We are just simply out of time, and the risk grows with every passing day, month, and year of inaction. So do the costs. Chair Henry, you once said when I first got here that yesterday's dollars are cheaper than today's, and I completely agree. But today we must make this investment. If the appropriate investments are not made and planned for, then we face significant risk to public safety, non-compliance with CSPA, and increased cost pressures, which limits our ability to plan and will end up costing our region and our taxpayers more in the long run. The original OTC2 was going to cost us $24 million. Standing at this moment, standing still at this moment is not what the fastest growing region in our province requires, and certainly not what the Durham residents deserve or expect from their public institutions, including the DRPS. Frankly, it is not what our members deserve. Our members who serve the community every single day right across this region. Before I conclude, I would like to note that the development of this report was intended to be a collaborative process. Our team participated in every step requested by the region. However, we were not involved in the final decision-making or the recommendations. And, I'm really concerned about that. We only became aware of these recommendations about 48 hours ago. And I have to tell you, I was a little upset to see that the recommendation is yet another deferral for a future year. Somebody else's problems kick this can down the road. There's a cost for standing still. With every passing week and month that we do not make a decision on the DRPS capital, the higher the financial and human costs become. I respectfully ask this council not to defer this decision to a future year, and that you seriously consider the consequences and the urgency of our needs. At next week's Finance Committee, I urge council to send a strong message that safety and security of our community and our members matter and help support our capital needs. I hope we're not back here next year. Thank you.
Chief, there are questions. I think what I'd like to do is for Sterling, just give me a thumbs up, and Mayor Collier. I'd like to do the whole presentation and then do questions, or Mayor Collier, as the chair, did you want to get your names off the list? Okay, so could we have the next presentation, please?
Good morning. So, thank you, Chief. So, good morning, Regional Chair, councillors, and members of the Police Services Board. As the Chief has presented, the service is facing significant and growing pressures and has developed a comprehensive 10-year operating and capital expenditure forecast that's rooted in the legislative mandate, growth projections, and strategic goals of the service. The operating forecast identifies both the forecasted cost pressures to continue to provide policing services at the 2026 approved levels, which is projected to cost over the 10-year forecast period $4.6 billion, as well as the projected operating costs to implement the staffing, modernization, and enabling systems, the strategic investments that the Chief has detailed. These strategic investments also include the estimated incremental debt servicing costs to support the service's $1.1 billion 10-year capital forecast. In total, the strategic investments are projected to cost $1.5 billion over the forecast period. The capital forecast outlines the major investments identified by the service to maintain and modernize policing infrastructure over 2026 to 2036. Investments in major facilities represent the largest component of the capital forecast, estimated at $1.1 billion, and were informed by technical assessments, including the AECOM facilities review. Projects have been sequenced and phased where possible to reduce delivery risk, align with the staffing growth and program implementation, and the smoothing of cash flows to moderate impacts on debt servicing costs, while are still based on the police's identified capital requirements. So from the financing side, so based on the expenditure forecast, regional finance staff in working with the service developed a plan within the region's broader financial forecast for how these expenses could be financed. Oh, sorry, I'm just going to slip to the next slide here. Sorry about that. So the financing forecast prioritized and leveraged all available and known non-tax sources. And in developing the financing forecast, we looked for all opportunities to smooth the resulting property tax impacts over the 10 years of the forecast while not impacting the timing of the expenditures. So of the forecasted $7.2 billion, $106.9 million is projected to be financed by provincial grants. This estimate includes the assumptions that the current existing court security, community safety and policing, youth and policing, and the RIDE funding will continue at similar levels across the forecast period. This strategy also includes the provincial funding for the Joint Air Support Unit until 2030. The plan includes $171.8 million in user fees and recoveries over the 10-year planning horizon. In addition to the fees for things like police records checks and pay duty fees, the estimate also includes $66.7 million in recoveries for the 911 emergency service system. Financing plan includes the use of $46.7 million in reserves and reserve funds. $6.7 million of this is operating reserves that have been set aside to support the maintenance of the service's helicopter, and those are aligned with the expenditure forecast that underpins those numbers. And then there's $40 million that are dedicated towards the capital forecast. Of this $40 million, $20 million has been set aside through previous police budgets to support their capital facility needs. With the balance, the remaining $20 million is coming from other regional reserves and reserve funds and has been used to reduce the amount of debt financing required to support the capital program. This is what we know of as being available right now that we could dedicate to the capital program. But as each project moves ahead and we finalize the specific financing source for each of those projects, we will again look for all opportunities where we can assign additional reserve and reserve fund financing to reduce the amount of debt required, and as a result, the property tax impacts of the capital program. The financing forecast also includes the use of $24.5 million in development charges over the 10-year plan. $20.3 million of these development charges are used to fund the capital investment upfront. So this is based on the cash flow that we anticipate having for development charges. They will be used to reduce the amount of debt that's required for those infrastructures. There's also the use of $4.2 million in development charges to fund debt servicing costs. So where we don't have the development charges in the bank, we're proposing to issue debt and use development charges as they come in to pay that debt to avoid having to use property taxes to do so. As Council is aware, there is uncertainty around the timing and the amount of development charges. The assumptions that underpin this forecast reflect current modeling of available development charge revenues over the forecast based on our current legislative framework for development charges. While the estimated development charge financing identified in this strategy is conservative, any further development charge reductions would increase reliance on debt financing and property taxes. And with Council's recent approval to proceed with an updated development charge background study, this strategy positions us well to ensure that the forecast, the capital forecast for the service, is included in that work as well. That gives us an opportunity to collect development charges for the portion of the capital forecast that is growth related. After considering all available financing sources, the majority of the balance of the facility capital program is forecasted to be financed from debt. The forecast identifies the need for an additional $1 billion in debt over the 10-year forecast. So this increases what council would have seen as part of the 2026 budget process. Our 10-year debt forecast that was delivered in 2026 was $4 billion. So this adds $1 billion to that, or about a 25% increase in the projected borrowings over the 10 years. So this increase in the projected debt program and its implications on the region's annual repayment limit, which I call the ARL, as well as the potential impacts on the region's credit rating, will need to be considered. So for those that may not be familiar, the annual repayment limit, or ARL, is the limit that is set by the province on the amount of principal and interest payments a municipality can take on for long-term debt and long-term financial obligations without requiring any additional approvals. Of the $1 billion in debt financing, approximately $10.8 billion is projected, as I said, to be development charge debt. So in other words, those debt servicing costs wouldn't have to be funded from taxpayers. Those would be funded from the development charges. So the annual debt servicing costs are projected to increase by $73.9 million over the forecast period, with 2036 annual debt servicing costs are estimated to be $87.1 million. So for context, this represents approximately 20% of our projected annual repayment limit from the province. After leveraging all of the available financing sources, the balance of the forecast, which is approximately $5 billion, is projected to be financed from property tax. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that implication of that is. So as noted on the slide, DRPS and regional staff continue to explore all opportunities for additional financing to reduce the projected debt and property tax funding requirement. So again, when we build these plans, we have to make assumptions around estimates, but we also want to rely on funding sources that are known. So we recognize there may be opportunities for additional senior government funding that we will continue to explore, as well as partnerships and shared services opportunities as well. In addition, we understand that there may be opportunities for sale of surplus properties that will result from the replacement of some of the police capital facilities, and certainly any third-party revenues that are received from those proceeds of sales would be used to reduce the capital forecast costs associated with this plan, meaning that we wouldn't have as much debt to be borrowed. So as mentioned, after leveraging all of the available funding sources, the balance of the forecast, or approximately $5.9 billion, is projected to be financed by property taxes. This results in annual incremental overall property taxes after assessment growth, so we've already taken into account the assessment growth, of 4.62% for 2027, approximately 4.25% in both 28 and 29, 3.8% in 2030 and 31, and it reducing down to 2.2% per year, with the last year, 2036, at 2%. This is the percentage increase in the overall regional portion of your property tax bill. So for a resident paying their taxes, the region portion of their bill would go up by 4.62%. So this percentage increase, again, is that overall, and any increases for the region would need to be added to that amount. So staff are initiating the detailed modeling for our 2027 budget now, but for context, we have projected a 1.2 budget pressure from 2026, as well as base pressures, which typically run us between 3 and 4.5%. And then any increases in service, so transit, housing, paramedic, would be in addition as well. As I've noted on the slide, review of the projected property tax impacts for police need to be considered within the context of the broader regional pressures as well as affordability considerations. I'm not going to go into as much detail on this slide around risks and uncertainties. There is a section in the report that provides additional details on both the expenditure risks and the financing risks, but a couple of things that I'll maybe just highlight. and the chief mentioned these in his comments as well, that over the 10-year planning horizon, police services are subject to ongoing legislative, regulatory, and policy changes at both the provincial and federal levels. Amendments to public safety legislation, labor standards, procurement rules, environmental requirements, disclosure and privacy frameworks introduce new compliance obligations, operating pressures, and capital requirements that we may not know of at this time. So the timing, scope, and funding and treatment of these changes represents a material uncertainty that could affect service delivery, expenditure forecasts, and the financing flexibility. In terms of the more significant risks and uncertainties on the financing side, we've talked about the uncertainties right now surrounding development charges revenue. The other one that I would highlight is around provincial funding. So predictable senior government funding is a priority for long-term planning. It's important that it's predictable and that the funding keeps pace with the increasing costs of providing services. Senior government funding for policing has increasingly shifted from a predictable long-term legacy approach to more shorter-term initiative-based funding. And this shift introduces uncertainty into our long-term operational and financial planning, as continued funding is subject to change. And then depending upon the time-limited funding, the risk is that those costs will incur at the end of that funding period and will transition to the local tax base to fund. And then just on our last slide, and this has already been touched upon, but the next stage in our process is there's a report coming before Finance and Administration Committee on Tuesday, and anticipated a report through to the Durham Police Service Board for their meeting on the following Tuesday. So I want to thank you for your time this morning, and certainly the chief, Elaine and Teresa, and myself would be happy to answer any questions.
So, thank you. Nicole, it might be easier just to answer questions from your seat over here.
Thank you.
And we do have questions. I know that you're first, Councillor Lee, but I'm going to go to the chair of the Police Services Board first. Mayor Collier.
Thank you, Chair. I guess my question would be to the clerk. As far as procedure, the recommendation is to receive information today. Would that be the recommendation that's going to go forward to finance, or is the report going to finance going to, have a different recommendation or look for a recommendation from the finance committee on their own?
So today is an educational training session, so the report goes to finance on Tuesday.
Right, but does it go with the recommendation to receive for information, or does it go with, the finance committee is going to make a decision?
I'll go to our CAO.
That's my question. Is the receive for information just because this is educational today, or is that going to be the recommendation from this council to finance?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there is no recommendation before council today because this is an education session. The report that will be released today as part of the Finance and Admin agenda is a report that is to be received for information.
Okay, so that's the recommendation will be the same on Tuesday as it is today, or Wednesday, whatever day the finance committee meeting is.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Chief, it might be easier if you take Mayor Collier's chair if you want, so you can sit down and answer questions. Specifically told me not to do that. Okay, Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Hopefully you can hear me.
We can hear you.
So my first few questions are to the Commissioner of Finance and their presentation. So the percentages that were provided for the next 10 years, do those, I know you said they kind of hit the capital, do those include any kind of future police hiring into that, or that is not factored into that?
Through the chair to Councillor Lee. So slide 8, I think it's slide 18. My eyes are not helping me here, but I think it's slide 18 where there was that table that had the projected property taxes. So that is comprehensive. So the total 10-year strategy that is here reflects what we would refer to as our sort of our base pressures, the cost to continue to deliver service into the future at today's service levels. It includes all of those pressures, contractual inflationary pressures. It includes the staff increases highlighted by the chief. It includes the modernization initiatives highlighted as well. So it's very comprehensive. And then from a capital perspective, it also includes the debt servicing costs associated with the capital plan as well. So it's comprehensive. It's meant to cover all areas of the police's operations over the 10 years.
That includes like the brand new officers. So we're saying that the police did a 10-year forecast for, in a sense, operation and capital, and barring any kind of surprises, these are the percentages going forward, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, that's very helpful. And right now, based on just the rough math, we're at about, for 2027, a 9.22% increase, barring any regional additional staffing or surprises, correct?
So I would, assuming we go, again, I tend to be the conservative in the crowd as the accountant. So if I take the 4.5 plus the 4.6, I'm looking at 9 plus 10. So I would say between 10 and 11% would be the increase.
10 and 11.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you have that forecasted out for 2028 as well, or just 2027?
Microphone, please, Nicole. Thank
Sorry,
you,
I'm
Roger.
having troubles with my mic here. So in terms of 2028, it would be about roughly about 0.5% lower.
Okay, great. Okay, now to the chief, if I may. So you, I believe at one point, did you say, no, you didn't say this. So broad question, is Durham Region Police Service the only police service that leases buildings, or are there other services in Ontario that also lease buildings as needed?
Chief, your mic's on.
Okay, I appreciate it. I didn't know whether to touch it or not. I can say that, you know, with a great deal of certainty, I know that we are the police service that leases the most buildings. And I can tell you that most of the lease spaces, certainly when I worked for the other police service just west of here, was very, very small and oftentimes only project based because they needed a pop-up space for something. So it was very specific, short time, and usually affiliated with a grant of some kind for a specific project.
Okay. And then you had mentioned in your presentation specifically, your assessment was that many of our buildings are past their lifespan. Some of them are 56 years, some of them are over 25. I guess, you know, pardon my ignorance, I thought buildings are kind of made to kind of last that long, you know, town halls and whatnot. I'm wondering, what is the lifespan for a building from a DRPS capital point of view?
Well, Mr. Lee, that's a multi-layered answer to that. I think you have to consider that building codes have changed. Adequacy standards in terms of accessibility have changed. There are things now that make building retrofit cost prohibitive. Plus, when you consider how policing used to be performed, I can tell you that today, you know, our buildings actually work against us in terms of generating collaboration, or the alternative, which is the security of information. And we're seeing this right now play out with the Inspector General's province-wide review on information leaks that have happened in policing. That's a multi-layered answer. I think I could take all afternoon answering it.
Okay, fair enough. What happens if we were to expand this 11 years or 12 years to make it easier to kind of absorb the budget? You're saying we are at critical mass, and I understand that point of view. And you're right. For the past 3 years, you have brought this up to this council. But you have to understand from our point of view, the 5 years before that, and I don't know, I can't speak because I've only been here for 8 years, there was no kind of alarm bells ringing. So to go from 0 to critical mass, like, it is somewhat jarring. So we're trying to adapt as best as possible. So instead of 10 years, what happens if this was stretched to 11, 12, 15 years? Are we saying that is not possible to extend this to make the numbers work so it's more palpable for like the tax base?
Mr. Lee, I will first disagree with the premise of your question. Plenty of notice was given. both to the services boards and to this council as it was made up at the time. I've found things as far back as 2000, 2003, in which these issues were raised. This should come as no surprise. And the more you push it out, the more that this is going to be problematic for our members and for our community. And quite honestly, a board at some point in time will have to consider whether they can deliver adequate, effective policing as it relates to, our facilities as well. And, there could be litigation. There's a whole host of things that could happen if we continue to push this out. But I guarantee you that pushing this to 12 years or, 14 years or whatever, if we're going to only start talking about it next year, is even more problematic and puts that timeline at, 16 years. Just to put it as an example, Mr. Lee, Clarington took 8 years to get the first building done and 8 years and counting, and the second and third buildings aren't delivered yet. That's 16 years, and we're no further to solving our problems.
Okay. Thank you for that. And it's based on your assessment, and I think you kind of said this in your presentation, that if we kind of don't do this within the next, 10 years, based on your numbers, we would risk being CSPA non-compliant. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm like, my job is to mitigate risk for the organization, and I'm just simply saying that at some point, whether it's me as the chief or somebody else as the chief, is going to have to present something to the board to alert the board when they feel that we don't have the facilities in order to deliver the core policing functions I just mentioned.
And that's sorry, go ahead.
Not even taken into account, and I point to our in the gallery here, the association representatives that are here. They have levers that they can pull too. And they've already begun to alert the service and the board that they are preparing to watch very closely how we manage this.
And I don't, what are you alluding to? Like, is there something
there's
that they
health
can...
and safety concerns here of not having potable water in a building or being able to take a shower. I mean, that's just, it's 2026.
No, I agree with that. But you had just said there's actions that the association could take. I'm fairly new. What actions would those be?
Well, they could call in the Ministry of Labor, for instance.
Okay. And then for just my last question, and thank you for the lenience, Chair. This whole idea of CSPA compliance, this regional body is somewhat at your mercy of its interpretation of whether we are CSPA compliant or not. I guess, is there an oversight board or a committee that checks CSPA compliance and says we are compliant or not compliant, or they don't do it that way? Like, how would we know as the regional representatives whether we are CSPA compliant or not?
There are 3 elected officials from this council that sit on the Police Services Board. It's their legislative duty to inform the board, and and at every single meeting that your representatives are at, the Inspector General has a representative that is monitoring the work of the police service boards.
And does that representative from the Inspector General kind of like say to our representatives, hey, you guys are really close to being CSPA non-compliant because of XYZ? Like, is that how it's kind of measured?
Yeah, that's not how the act is written exactly, Mr. Lee. And just in the interest of time, I could maybe sit down with you and walk you through exactly how the IG would do their work. But I invite you to go to their website, and you can actually begin to be informed by many of the publications that they put forward and how they're going about their work and what their mandate is and how they action that mandate.
Sure. Okay, those are all my questions. Thank you, Chair.
So Chief, members of council are referred to as councilors.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Not Mr.
I apologize. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean that. No disrespect, Councillor Lee. My apologies.
And next on the list is Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chief. And, we know that some of these things are needed, more or less. I'm going to take another tack. So you keep alluding to the training center in Ottawa of $200+ million. that may work for them. Why couldn't we have, how would this compromise public safety? If we had a training center that encompassed Peel and York and Halton region and ourselves, wouldn't that be probably a more pragmatic way to do this? Would that, have you explored those possibilities of having a training center for all of these other regions, etc.?
I'm sorry, Councillor Anderson, you're saying share?
Yeah, a training center, it's training.
There's no one facility can house nor accommodate all the training that needs to take place. There's 365 days in a calendar, and that's what I have to fit the training in, and I still have to deliver adequate and effective policing. There's no way any of this could be delivered from one structure. And we're not building, I appreciate your question about, what Ottawa is building at $223 million. That's what it costs. Like, I don't want to beat around the bush about what the cost is. This is a very specialized building, and we're not building anything extraordinary here. We're building for the basic needs of a police service. Peel, York, all of these police services have built to that at a time when dollars were less than they are today. They're ahead of the game. We're behind.
They all have individualized training centers?
Yes.
Okay. On another point, your headquarters, they all have, you keep referencing that we are the only region that doesn't have a standalone police headquarters. Are those headquarters not used for other purposes, municipal purposes in those other regions? I believe they do.
No, sir.
It's strictly?
If you talk about our GTA comparators, there's nobody at all that has anything like we have right now. I asked for space for 46 more desks. We lost 800 square feet. And I get the whole thing about shared space. We are not a shared space kind of environment because of the security of our our business. And I can't even invite the public here. The meeting rooms are woefully inadequate. There's a number of things that should have been addressed years ago that weren't, and it falls to us now to identify these and move forward. And more importantly, consolidating operations in a police headquarters is not a vanity project, let me be clear. It is a cost-saving measure because we are renting space and we continue to rent space, and the space that we rent creates other inefficiencies that reflect in full-time equivalent lost hours.
So I'm not saying what we have or what you have is adequate, but I'm saying even if you get a new facility, would there be other purposes that it could be used for as well?
Community rooms, absolutely. And that's actually one of the things I said in my presentation. That is actually a critical need at all of our police stations, is a place to meet with our community in a way that makes sense, where we can hold community meetings and just meet with all of our communities, for sure. Yes, great point, Councillor.
My other questions would be for finance. So we are going to have tax increases for the next 10 years. We know we're in a 10-year situation when it comes to development charges. So conservatively, say development charges, you get 50% less than what you're projecting now. What would the cost be to the taxpayer, if you have an answer for that?
So, Councillor, it's not just the reduction of development charges. It's whether the municipalities will be compensated with funding from the province or the federal government.
Yeah.
So you're asking a mathematical question that's almost impossible to answer until our staff has the appropriate information. But Commissioner, if you'd like to try to answer that question.
I keep hearing about making us whole, but...
Well, it's Councillor, so the amount of money the government is set aside, the annual allotment of over $800 million doesn't meet the infrastructure needs of the City of Toronto. In fact, the whole $8 billion doesn't meet the infrastructure needs of just the City of Toronto. So when you look at every municipality vying for funding, I don't know where the money's going to come from if they cut it by half. Did I do a very, I'll just ask, did I do an okay job explaining that? Thank you.
Okay, so we are going to, okay, say the tax increases when we combine would be double digits, close to double digits over the next 10 years?
Well,
do you wanna go?
Counselor, I'm going to say that the council going forward will be very, very different. I won't, as you all know, I will not be here because I will not be the appointed person. You will have a chair that will have very specialized powers, and I trust in the members of this chamber to do their absolute best. So you can't forecast what the increase will be next year. And I think it's kind of hard to put staff on the spot.
Okay. Was just a
As confused as I
estimator
am.
again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, those are all my questions.
Mayor
Thank you.
Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking, we've had Councillor Anderson, myself, Councillor Wu. Apparently, Clarington's going to take all the oxygen in the room. Promise not. If you'll give me a bit of latitude just in response to a couple, we've heard 10, 11% tax increases. To your point, Mr. Chair, there will be an appointed chair with strong powers. We don't know what those powers are. I think we can assume that it will be the chair's budget. I cannot imagine, so that this is not on social media and reported, that we are looking at increasing taxes by 11%. I cannot imagine a council or a chair agreeing to that. So I think we need to put a bit of a box around that so we don't have a lot of fear mongering going on. And here comes the but. To our Commissioner of Finance, can you express things in dollar amounts as opposed to percentages? You've heard me suggest this before, that people don't spend percentages, they spend dollars. So if we go back to slide 18, can you do your best to translate some of these into dollars, which will help people to understand a cost benefit far better than a percentage?
So through the chair, just some, I'll say, rough math for 2027. The police portion, so the 4.62%, translates to roughly $173 per year, incremental, roughly $14 a month.
Okay, and that's great, and I would encourage, as we move forward, and I'm trying to do that. It's hard to change old habits, but trying to get people to focus on, again, dollars, not percentages. I'm going to look at Councillor Chapman for a moment. He's one of the ones, and people are not going to understand where I'm going with this. But you recall the Taj Mahal in Bowmanville, yes? The Taj Mahal was the nickname of the former police station. So I'll suggest to members of council who are around, if you went to the Taj Mahal, which is now the recycling center, before the new facility was built in Clarington, that was a very, very sorry, sad, well beyond its best before date. And again, for members of council that have been around, Mr. Chair, as were you, the decision to build the new center in Clarington, that was not an easy decision, and it was not a decision that got a lot of public support. As a matter of fact, there were a number of councillors that fought against that because of the cost of that. In the day, it seemed brutally expensive. To your point and to the chief's point, glad we're not building it today, given the cost of that. But I would suggest that council in the past has, and I suspect will be severely criticized for supporting things. We're the ones that get the emails. Chief, and I'll look to the CAO on this. I had spoken with both of you about bringing a motion forward, looking at how police budgets are done. The chief is clearly frustrated, and I understand the frustration. We are frustrated. The system, to my mind, amongst many others, is broken. We're looking at small communities where the province is providing funding on OPP to help them with that. Your funding challenges are as big or greater. Chief, can you give us a sense of what on your side you are doing to try to get some of those alternate streams that you spoke about from the province to help us out and to help you out? Well, helping you out helps us out.
Yeah, absolutely, and great question, Mayor. Can I call him Mayor? Mayor Foster, Councillor Foster. I mean, look no further than our helicopter, for instance. That was a conversation we entered because our helicopter's 26 years old and was nearing the end of its lifespan. And looking forward, we began to talk to the province about what, the funding may look like. That turned into a regional service with other police services. At the time, and we're still seeing elevated numbers of carjackings and other things that are happening. Helicopters in other jurisdictions began to make sense. And through our starting of a conversation, we were able to then secure $32.5 million that has allowed us to not only get a helicopter at the end of this 5-year agreement, but also fund its operation for 5 years. And we will wind down the use of our current helicopter over that same period of time. We do seek grant funding and other opportunities for one-offs, but there is no sustained grant funding that exists for core policing functions. And facilities falls into that core policing function. I will say this. Even in our RFI that we undertook to identify, what the models may look like, there are a number of different alternatives here that we could bring to bear, and that I highly encourage finance in the region to consider. But I will say we are also looking at partnerships with other institutions, and I won't name them now because we're in these we're having conversations with them right now. Even on a cost recovery point. We are looking to not only build our facilities for what we need, but in a way that can also generate some revenue for us to offset the cost to our taxpayers. And we're actively engaged in that. But none of these conversations can actually happen until we begin the work of design and identifying and moving forward.
So, Chief, on a broader basis, if you could identify how we can advocate, how the association can advocate, how regional council and regional staff can advocate with the province. Grants are great, but it's like winning the lottery. When you win it, it's great, but there are so many times when you've got a ticket that you throw in the garbage, and it's not a sustainable model. Madam CAO, on the same, and we've had a number of discussions, advocacy efforts, it would be the province to get sustainable funding to, we've had this conversation so many times and so many issues, to the region. Can you speak to what's going on and perhaps what should be going on?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. We have worked across the GTHA regional and single-tier governments to discuss with the province the increased pressure that policing costs are putting on the property tax base and on our respective budgets. We have been advocating for increased resources and also acknowledging, given the limited oversight that municipalities have for a review of and general governance in terms of how police should be funded. I can't say that has gone very far. We continue to collect some data, and I know the executive director for the mayors and regional chairs group has been working with police associations to align the data with a view to continuing that advocacy, but it is certainly one of the advocacy priorities that we have given Strategy Corps as our lobbyist, and we continue to raise as we do our delegations provincially at AMO and other areas.
So I'll suggest, Chief and Madam CEO, that perhaps some discussion dialogue on a motion. It may be appropriate. I held off on that because there is some dialogue. It sounds like that's being stalled out, but this is not working. And lastly, Chief, because I can't help myself. Moseport is, I know you're speaking with Moseport and do a lot of training. We've got new owners that are looking at significant improvements that might satisfy or help satisfy the motor vehicle training. And while I have not had the opportunity, there's a wonderful Porsche track with amenities there. So, and if you're trying it out,
Mayor Foster,
invite me. I'm done.
your time is up. Thank you. Councillor Wu?
Yeah, through the chair, and I'm just going to follow up. Mayor Foster spoke about the Taj Mahal. And some of us were on council back in the day, probably around about that time of 2014, and you are correct. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, that is the last new build for the police services, other than phase one. And the projected cost, and I had to Google this, but $38 million. And I don't know through the chair if I directed that to the Commissioner of Finance, what phase two, what the cost of that is? Or would you happen to have that offhand?
So just before the commissioner responds, we had to acquire another piece of property for phase two. I think, I'm going by memory. Thank you. So the land costs would be in there as well? So I'm not sure. And in phase one, we had to accommodate for a waterway that ran through the property, which added some additional costs. Why don't you continue with your questions while our Chief Financial Officer is working that out. How's that? Okay.
Well, why I say that, and it's coincidental that you mentioned there is a waterway that runs through there.
The river runs through it.
That's right. Yeah, I appreciate those notes. You're better than Google. We seem to, and again, with that waterway, and I'll look to one division that we have up north. And I think it was brought up about community safety and policing. I would say, and certainly that has been brought up, about health and safety of anything. And if somebody were to challenge that, it would be based on it. Now, what I'm trying to get to is, Chief, and I think we've said this a number of times, members of council, regional and local, have been invited to a tour of all the facilities. And Chief, have members of council, regional, local, or even staff toured our facilities?
Yeah, some have.
I have.
Yeah, some have.
And also on that facility in Port, and I'm sorry, because I'm going by memory. I think we came up with I'll have to go to our Commissioner of Works. Didn't we come up with a $2 million solution to bring water into that facility a couple years ago? Commissioner, your microphone, please.
Oh, sorry. Yes, it was $2 to $3 million, and the estimate's about 2 years old.
Okay.
We don't have a current estimate.
Now, through the chair and to the commissioner, and I think that's much appreciated, but also from a spatial point of view, and if you've been there, for the amount of, and the numbers, and I would say that for all facilities, units that we, divisions that we have, spatially, we've outgrown those buildings. If you've been up there, there's not enough even space for locker rooms. That one up in Port Perry, and Chair, you've been there. I don't think you would even have a shower in there. I don't know if you'd agree with me on that.
When I was in Port Perry, I didn't check the showers.
But again, I'll go back, and I know the Commissioner of Finance is looking. Like I say, this is just from Google. From when you go from 38 million back in 2014, we opened, or in about that time, we opened up, I'm going to use Mayor Foster's, the Taj Mahal in 2016, so and opened in for 10 years. Now, phase two, and we're looking at over $100 million. So I think there was something that the chief did say about yesterday's dollar compared to today's dollar, but in that time, and I think anybody that is in this room at the local level, just even a recreation complex in Brooklyn, a recreation complex in Oshawa, they're in the $300 million range. It's incredible, the cost.
Councillor, the commission,
No, not in that range?
no.
Okay, but it's expensive.
Councillor, the commissioner has the answer for you.
Okay.
Nicole?
So through the chair to Councillor Wu, the budget, the approved budget for Clarington Phase 2 is $109.5 million.
Okay. So what I say, that's about 3 times what Phase 1 was?
But recognizing that construction costs on any project in this country is increased by the supply and demand needs and the cost of labor. So it's not just in fairness to the police department, it's not just about the increased costs over time, it's also about the increased cost of materials. Everything is more expensive, including the design work is incredibly expensive.
And I appreciate you mentioning that, Chair, because again, by waiting and waiting and waiting, do you anticipate costs would come down? Or are they only going to go up?
You know what, I wish I had a crystal ball. And also now you throw in tariffs on important equipment that comes in and out of the country. That's why last week at the meeting, we talked about the cost of aluminum, just at the last council meeting. So I would like to think that it would come down, but I doubt it.
They're only going to go up.
Only going to go up.
And my last question, and if you'll indulge me, and I'll direct this through you to the chief. And we try to lobby through different groups, you know, whether we send letters or locally, the Police Services Board, the association, about the increased cost, especially how it affects us at budget time. With the chief, and he speaks to the different chiefs of police. In fact, the chief, I think in June, will be the chair, the president of the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police. But in speaking to the other chiefs, and we talked about our budget and certainly the amount
Councillor,
increase
you're
for
running out of
police
time.
services. With the other chiefs, have you found that in other police services, the increase in the police budgets?
Yes, I have, and many of them don't have the same capital pressures that we have because they have planned, and almost all of them have reserves that they have allocated money to address these issues to mitigate it for their taxpayers today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Pickles?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Chief, and to Nicole for the presentations we've had today. I certainly agree with what's been said with respect to funding models for police and looking at how OPP is funded and trying to address the great gap that's there. And Mr. Chair, I know there's a lot of, for lack of a better word, balls in the air with respect to what's happening with development charges and budget processes and regulation from the province. The question I had, and the chief just mentioned the necessary capital funding requirements for capital. When I look at one of the last slides we had there about budget forecasts, the increases percentage earlier on in the 10-year term are higher than at the end of the term. So I use the expression front-loaded. But my question is, if one of the greater needs is capital, and we've all been through a big capital project, they take years to plan and deliver. So you start off with design, then you hire somebody to do the detailed design, then you go through a tender process, usually a two-stage tender process, qualifiers, and then the tendering process. So can you give me an idea, Chief, or maybe it's more of a Nicole question, how long would it take to be prepared to build something and then finance that something to get it built? And how does that relate to the forecast sort of being front-loaded for the larger increase in costs?
I'd like to defer this question to our CFO, Teresa Fetter, who has that answer ready.
Yes, thank you, and through the chair, thank you for the question. So it is front-loaded in the first couple of years, and there's a couple reasons for that. One is that our immediate needs are for, as the chief has mentioned, the building of a modern facility and training campus, as well as the replacement of Central East Division. And ideally located, they would be able to be put onto the same capital project. Both of those investments are significant. The training center, as you saw in the video for Ottawa, has a significant price tag, again, because of the type of facility, the scale of the facility. So that's one of the reasons why that front portion is heavy loaded, as well as from the timing perspective. You know, we are looking, because of the dire need and because of the number of facilities that we need to replace in the next 10 to 12 years, we are looking at faster models to achieve development of those buildings. So, you know, traditionally we've used a design bid build process, which requires that comprehensive piece for the bids and going out to market. And as the chief mentioned, we've already gone out and got an RFI done to get some information to help us scale back the completion time of a project and look into more modern models of construction development.
And if I can just add, the clock is ticking, because we need these buildings online to avoid getting into extended leases that will take us well beyond what our needs actually are. And right now I spend $5.2 million a year on lease costs. So, you know, if I have to retrofit another building that I have to lease somewhere else, just the costs grow exponentially.
Commissioner?
So through the chair, if I could just add, so in working with Teresa, and this I think speaks to your, also speaks to your question, Councillor Pickles. So the need, as the police have indicated, is now. So what we did as well when we modeled the property tax impacts, so where you see those increases coming, what we did on these projects, especially the ones in the first part of the forecast, those large ones like the Oshawa campus that the chief and Teresa have spoken to, we asked them to provide us a cash, based on best information that they have available, a cash forecast of when they anticipate the cost to come out, so that we could, knowing that their capital forecast is front-end loaded, we could look at ability to spread out those debt servicing costs so that they don't hit all immediately in the first year. Because of the size of the project, we could issue multiple debentures for these projects, and that's what is proposed, and that's what's underpinning all of these numbers here. So we looked at cash flow and we said, okay, we can, it is, as Teresa said, they're looking at all ways to speed up the delivery of these capital projects. So we're not able to spread it over, you know, like 5 years, but we are able to spread them around 3 years. So the increases that you're seeing in years like 2028 and 2029, some of those increases is paying for the debt that will be incurred when that project is approved. But we've again tried to tailor it to cash flow, so we've tried to smooth some of those impacts for council.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate those answers. I mean, my experience is, unless you're going to copy somebody else's design build plan so that you can implement it, if you're designing it from your own for scratch, you're upfront, you got design costs and architects and stuff, but you're not going to have a shovel in the ground for a couple of years. So I was a little bit concerned about that projection. So I'm hoping that the answer to my second question isn't no, but I have a feeling it is. Is there a provincial grant system for police stations, for police training facilities? Did Ottawa get a substantive grant from the province to assist with these required but expensive costs?
Not as it exists right now, but we are speaking to the different levels of government, seeking opportunities to co-develop some solutions to some of the existing programs that they have, seeing if we can fit any portion of this, particularly around the technology piece, into some of the established programs that they have. But that work is underway right now, and I hope to benefit from that in the future. Hope we all benefit is what I mean.
Well, I hope through your and our ongoing, Mr. Chair, our ongoing advocacy that we have with the province, that there's some assistance there with these capital costs. And I know Clarington has told its stories. I remember when I started on council, we got a fire ladder truck and it was almost $1 million. And I was blown over by the fact that it was almost $1 million. We just got a new one and it was over $2 million. So thank you, Mr. Chair. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor McCaughey.
Thank you. So I'll first start with the sports complex that is 154 million, not 300 and something. A very complex building with lots of very complex things inside, heating and cooling and whatnot. So just wanted to put that out there because it was not that high. But it was still high, a lot higher than it would have been 10 years sooner. So, and I do appreciate those comments being made around the room. I think I want to circle back to our opening remarks this morning. Our CAO opened today with the offer to assist. And I heard that, and I heard it very clearly. We have a lot of great talent at the region. And I know that our finance people are communicating back and forth really well. But I hear that, Ramesh's team, Commissioner Works, would be a very valuable asset to have on board when we're looking at building more assets. And I think I would like to have the CEO maybe expand on what she meant by assisting, because I think that there is a world of help that's available through the region. I think you said efficiencies, if I can be clear.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, at present, there is a number of services provided by the region to DRPS, including services from Works with respect to its capital program, finance department in terms of financial management, etc. There is, I think, a kind of direction within DRPS right now to bring more and more of those services in-house. And while in some areas that may be quite legitimate, in other areas I am concerned that there could be an unnecessary duplication given the magnitude of the financial pressures that we're facing. But in order for us to advance that, I think we would need a joint working group with the chief and I at the table to talk about where the opportunities are and how we can strengthen them going forward.
Thank you. So as a supplemental question, Chief, are you willing to work with our CAO in a working group and try to bring these numbers down in any way that we can? I mean, we are, I know you're not naive. I know that St. Andrew's Food Bank is empty. The shelves are empty today. So this is a huge ask of us to be looking forward, and I appreciate everything that's being said. But I'm also getting the comments from our community, especially from our seniors that are on fixed incomes, that are looking at their property taxes, and they're concerned. So I need to hear that we're willing to work together collaboratively to try to get these numbers down in any way that we can.
I've been willing to work since the moment I got here, and for a variety of reasons, that work has been delayed, and today we find ourselves here. I have to say that, none of my comments should be perceived as somehow questioning the work and the great work that's done by regional staff. The commissioners that are in the room here, their people do incredible work, and they have my utmost respect for what they do. But the number is five project managers, and 16 years later, we don't have the Clarington Police Complex delivered. I need to bring this in-house because I can't wait 16 years to build this stuff. I need to get this going because our needs are today. Our needs were 10 years ago. This is not new. This has been back then. When we talk about grants and looking to offset costs, the reality is that this is a core responsibility of the municipalities. The province, may very well and rightfully ask, have you sought grants for the other things that are being done? Long-term care, we have more than is actually required by the municipality. I'm not saying that's not important. I live in this region. I want long-term care for sure. in here. But these are the priorities that need to be set by council. And these are the very things that are looking. And no one at an inquest, when it all falls apart, is going to, really care about, where that decimal place was or whose responsibility. They're going to just, look back at, the countless volumes of correspondence that exists and when problems were identified and what was done to mitigate that. I'm really concerned about that. And that's, I also live in this region. Actually, you're my representative. And I worry about the cost. I worry about the cost of my property taxes and what the impacts are. But there's cost and there's value. And I think that this is an unavoidable cost because the value is there for the services that we deliver.
So supplementary, one last question. I have time. Just when we circle back to asset management then, you showed us video of a 22-year-old building with the roof leaking. I don't go out and buy a new house, I fix my roof. So, I'm just wondering what is going on with asset management then, that we have that sort of deterioration in a fairly new building that is not an old building by any means.
There's so many things wrong with our buildings. It's not just one thing. And while we fix one thing, the leak is somewhere else. I think Chair Henry at one time when I was explaining this, he remembered back when the building, I think was open or shortly after it opened, he said, there were leaks then in the Oshawa station. This is not new. And it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And we're getting to the point where it's untenable. And now we have to take action. We have no choice. Delaying this another year means tacking on even more years to the completion of this project. We need to get going. We need to get moving.
So we're talking a lot about capital infrastructure through your chair. And, we're talking about funding capital. Are we funding asset management within that?
Yes, that's one of the components. I think it was my second last slide, spoke exactly to that area. And in addition to that, like an employee resource management system as well, PeopleSoft in just a few years will not be supported by Oracle. We need to be moving and looking at another process. We're undertaking that work. That costs money. All of these things are converging right now, should have been dealt with and planned. And, if we had a reserve, maybe we can use some of that money, but we don't. And that's another thing that the board gave me direction to seek and work with the region. So we talk about cooperation and working with the region. We've been there. We've been at the tables. We produced the materials. We're waiting. I know. And that's a concern.
All right, thank you. Would the CAO like to address any of those comments, just for clarity?
Just to say that, PeopleSoft is a great example where that is an area that we've worked together, and I think there are still opportunities to continue to do that. And we do significant long-term planning within the region, so we certainly include in that replacing key pieces of infrastructure and technology when we know that the system is about to change. So it's a reality. The other thing I would say with respect to the time required for the Clarington facility, it's never quite black and white. There was a lot of change orders and a lot of technical difficulties given the I'm not sure the term, the geotechnical nature of the property for phase one. So some of these things do result in taking longer time. With all of the work that we're doing in the region and revitalizing our housing stock and expanding our housing stock, we have embraced modular and faster construction and are completing projects in 2 to 3 years, which is quite extraordinary. So there are definitely opportunities, and our capital works team is very well aware of them and embracing them. And we're happy to work with DRPS to explore those options for police facilities also.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Chapman?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure who can answer this one, either the chief or our treasurer. It says slide 23, but I don't think I ever hit the screen. It's page 25 of 27. It says for 2026 pending request, major capital facilities, 93 million. Can anybody tell me what that's for?
I could start, and certainly if the chief wants to add, that is, so we understand that the Police Services Board at their meeting may be considering advancing some work on that Oshawa campus that the chief spoke about. So through our discussions and building this strategy based on our understanding of what is anticipated to come before the board in May, this is reflective of what that understanding is.
Okay.
I hope that's okay.
Is that correct?
Yeah, and we
Okay.
are in open session, so I don't think it's about a land issue, so I just want members of council, if they're going to question this, to be conscious of that.
Well, the trick is it's already out in the open about what he wants to build. So the fact that it's listed
No, I'm
here for
talking-
93 million, it's not a confidential document. But on the next page, it shows property tax funded and DC financed. How come none of that can be DC financed?
So through the chair, what we did when we looked, so from a financing methodology perspective, what we looked at is we looked at the property tax impacts associated with it and where it's best to put those in order to reduce the overall property tax impact. So we know that in the and I apologize, this might be too specific.
Okay, so
apologize,
it was
but
a decision that
It's a financing
the two
decision.
financial people
Yeah.
made to say how to make it a little
Yes.
more even.
Because, yes. and
Okay, that's
because-
fine. I just
okay.
was wondering whether it didn't qualify.
So some of we're still trying to understand as well. We've made some assumptions on where DC funding can be applied because the capital forecast that's before council is different than the capital forecast that's in the DC background study. So that makes it difficult to
Okay.
determine what. Some of the components of the Oshawa campus are not DC eligible for funding. So until we have a better understanding of the overall cost, we have contemplated DCs for the construction part of it, which would are timed to hit in 2027.
Okay.
Sorry, Councillor Chapman.
Which leads to the next question. When you go to the next one there and you got the big number up there, right? And you show that as increasing as part of the tax rate, but the debenture wouldn't necessarily be taken out, so it wouldn't be debt serviced in 2027, so it might not have the same impact on tax rate. Would that be a fair question?
So through the chair, yes. So if we go to the slide before on slide 20.
Yeah, that one there.
Yeah. So there is debt servicing costs, and I apologize, you don't see it in this table here. I'm just going to look at the other one. The debt servicing costs associated with the potential 2026 costs aren't, some of it is already included in the 2026 budget. The balance of that doesn't start to hit until 2028. So we haven't contemplated, we've shown it as debenture financing coming in, but the operating costs associated with servicing that debt are not in the 2027 forecast number. They don't start to hit until 2028 or 2029.
Which then could reduce that bottom number, right? When you actually start getting the loans or when you have to actually start paying for it? Because if we have a debenture this year, we usually don't start paying for it till at least next year or the next year. And we're not paying for stuff until we're buying things, right? Like a building.
That's correct.
We have to pay for the land to get the land, but if the construction doesn't start for 2 years, we're not paying for the construction cost during those 2 years that we're waiting, correct? The debenture would be 2 years later.
That's correct. So the numbers that are before you in the proposed property tax increases already contemplate not starting to pay that debt for at least 2 years.
Okay, great. So there was some talk about how our old buildings were. So the Oshawa Central Station, by the way, was built in 1972 for the city of Oshawa. And when I served there, we had 6 officers that worked out of there after 11 o'clock at night. 6 officers, right? And we had 3 homicide detectives working out. And we had a beautiful community room. We didn't have any bail and reform. So the needs of the stations have changed over the last 25 years. Would that be correct, Chief?
Absolutely.
Okay, sorry, I missed one of my other questions. That's for the treasurer. 2 of them, actually. Lease to own, lease versus own. So the police lease a lot of property right now, and I heard the chiefs talk about $5 million or something like that. So in this program, have we taken into consideration that once the new building is built and everything is brought together, that money will obviously go towards the debt or whatever?
So through the chair, yes, so the forecast includes any savings for facilities that are no longer required, the operating cost savings associated with those, whether they be lease costs or utility costs, those are contemplated in the numbers before you as well. And certainly the service was
Okay, so
had put those
that could
forward for
reduce
us.
some of the future debt once the building gets online, correct?
So there are, so
There's
yes.
still the debt, but it might reduce some of the operation and maintenance costs that the chief has to have in his budget.
Yes, so the savings are already reflected in that
Okay,
baseline.
perfect.
Yeah.
Great. The other one is on slide 17, you got proceeds from sale of surplus property, things you're looking at. Like right now, when we have a debenture, it goes against the police budget. And it shows up, so the police budget is, we need a 4% increase because of the property. But when the property is sold off, right, it doesn't go back. We build a new works depot and we sell out the old property, that money goes back into the same fund to reduce the overall regional one. Is this what we're talking about here, trying to do here, so that it doesn't stay looking like the police have a 27% increased budget?
Yes, so through the chair, what we're thinking about here and what our strategy is we understand, like in the example of the, if we take an example, I don't know if this is the case or not, but with the Oshawa one, you know, if there was an opportunity where the existing Oshawa facility was no longer required after the new one is built, what we would do is obviously the money is going to come in after we've already
Yes.
incurred the expense. So if we anticipate a situation where there will be a significant revenue stream coming in, what we will do is we will structure the debt when we go out to issue it such that we can structure it with a balloon payment, so that when those proceeds come in, we can pay off the debt and have no more debt servicing costs for it. And then if it's a bit delayed, we can just extend our borrowing terms. So we can really tailor it so that the police budget reflects that revenue source coming in.
Great, excellent, good, thanks you. So Chief, there was a mention that maybe we should double up with York or somebody to have a training facility. Question for you is, when the officers are doing training, right, they're there with all their equipment, and if there was an emergency, they would be getting into some kind of police vehicle and attending it if you needed to expand the resources that you had. Would that be a fair question?
Yeah, and absolutely, that is one of the benefits.
Right. Okay. And I just want to talk about project management. And I know that things have changed, but over the last number of years, because I've been on council 16 years and I was 31 years on the police department. Over those years, things have changed. We've got better staff at the region in Pine Pigeon, but there's been a lot of missteps, both on the police side and on the regional side. So for example, the property where the, whatever the station is, 18 Division on Taunton Road, right? The police never wanted the station there, by the way. And it was a whole piece of property that was bought, and it took out part of the water. One quarter of it was gone originally. We were going to actually build a real-time operations center there with our communications center there, but then the ambulance came along. When we were building a station down in South Oshawa, those portable stations at that time, the project manager at the time from the region wanted to have the whole front of the station glass because it would look good. And when I asked the question, who's going to pay to replace the glass every time somebody goes by and throws a brick through there when there's no officers around, nobody could answer that. So I think working together, I think police is a speciality, and this is why you have to know what you're doing. And I was in charge of facilities at one time. You got to know what you're doing. You don't make Taj Mahals. You make it for necessary and for growth. And that goes for all the things that the police do. Thank you.
Commissioner Nicole, Councillor Chapman raised an interesting point with the sale of assets to offset this. So the question would be to you or to the police. As the facilities are built and the leases end, there is money in the base budget now for those projects. That money would be applied to the debt, correct?
Yes, so certainly the work that the service has done in forecasting out the expenditures has been very comprehensive as they've walked us through it and shared it. And those are some of the questions that we've asked when we were walking through it, like, what is the offsetting lease cost? What are the offsetting utility costs? And those are factored into the estimates that are here before you.
Teresa, do you know what the annual costs are now that we're paying for leased spaces? And just so council has an idea of the amount of money that would go back against the debt.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, we pay about $5 million a year in lease costs, half of which are for our space in this building.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McDougall.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Nicole. And thank you, Councillor Chapman, for telling me exactly how many years you were on the force and how many years you've been here. Because I was concerned that you might have served in that building the year I was born and the year it was built. All levity aside, I'm just going to change direction for 1 second here. On slide 5, it was interesting. I found it interesting. It said changing pressures. Ages 15 to 29 are disproportionately represented in offending, victimization, and mental health apprehensions. And I know that I'm looking at you, Chief, have been working hard to renew the force and bring many new hires on. What is the demographic that you are hiring from? Is any of this a concern in the wellness of the new hires that you have coming in?
Yeah, wellness is a priority for the service and a priority for the board. In fact, last year alone, we spent $3 million on just psychological services for our members. We're very proactive. We have a robust return to work program. There's Healthy Apples. There's a family program as well. We engage members on their first day about wellness, because there's a cumulative impact for this. And when our members, suffer an injury, we work hard at getting them back to work in some capacity as quickly as possible, some at varying degrees. And our program itself last year returned 158 people back to work. And this outpaces by a large margin any of the other comparator services in the GTA. They just don't know how we're doing it. And that investment is an important one that the board has prioritized, and certainly our command has prioritized. And as an organization, we're trying to be as proactive as we can to prevent them from going off in the first instance.
Thank you. And actually, the core of the question is are you disproportionately seeing an increase perhaps in the youth range that you're hiring now? I'm not sure that they have the same skill sets that the previous generations may have had in terms of dealing with certain...
Yeah, the different cohorts of age,
Yes, sir.
and we have many different cohorts of age groups there. But the reality is those who suffer injuries and mental health injuries really range across the spectrum. It isn't what you think it is, actually.
Okay, very good. And then, so another question I had was, I see and hear what you're saying, and I understand exactly your concerns are real, and to say they're not real would be gaslighting you. And I don't want to do that. I do have concerns, though, that, having come home during Frosh Week from my first week in engineering and having my head shaved and going to the barber in Oshawa, and he said, Ian, you stick with engineering, and I'm going to stick with barbering. And so, I have to be honest, when you came forward with a proposal to purchase a building in Pickering, I think it was, the first concerns I had was, it's a police station, it needs to be a post-disaster building.
Yep.
I'm not sure, and the cost to retrofit a regular building to a post-disaster building, I'm not sure if that was considered in your modus operandi in policing. Was that considered?
Yeah, so it was. And I have to tell you, when we began to move on that and other properties that we've looked at across the region, we've been to a lot of buildings out here. We try to solve this problem with the least impact. But you're quite right. The post-disaster recovery is a massive consideration and something you almost have to build by design.
Correct.
And that is something that we quickly identified, and why we didn't go ahead. One of the reasons we didn't go ahead with that purchase. It just wouldn't make financial sense the more we explored that property.
And then further, you're not wrong about you have no historic buildings that need to be maintained historically, not intentionally historic. The question, so the idea that we're going to build new is cheaper than retrofitting is quite true. The question I have is, so back to the budget side of things, in terms of when we purchase a property, then we move to you know, geotech testing to design. So 3 or 4 years down the road is when we're going to see the bulge come through the snake, or 7 or 8 years. But by front-ending the budget through to Nicole, do we not end up with compound returns on that taxation increase early for you, Mr. Chair?
So I want to make sure I understand your question correctly, Councillor McDougall. So if I'm not going down the right spot, please correct. The impacts, so certainly because it is a front-end loaded forecast, the incremental property tax increases that are in the outer years are lower, in part because the increases are higher in the earlier years, and you have a higher property tax levy requirement in those early years. So you've got a bigger base to calculate those increases off in the forecast. So certainly that is a function that you're seeing with those lower increases on the latter end. If the question was also around the timing of bringing those expenses online, we've tried really hard in presenting these numbers here to line up the tax levy requirement associated with the different financing sources to smooth that increase out and to recognize it when the cash is actually leaving our bank. So as an example, when you look at the capital forecast and you look at how it's financed, you see there that we're financing, you know, a certain amount from debt. Just because that amount of debt is shown in that particular year, that the translation of that debt financing to the actual tax levy requirement is not in that year. It's actually modeled, depending upon the project, it's modeled 2 to 3 years out to start. Except the exception for this, and I should have had the comment for Councillor Chapman, was with respect to land. That is the only difference. So where there's contemplation of land acquisition that would be debt financed, those debt servicing costs occur in the next year for the most part, because as the councillor had pointed out, it's usually 6 months after going to market before you make your first repayment.
Through you, Mr. Chair, back to Nicole. So I'm just looking back at slide 23, I think it is, or 22. You talked about smoothing it out. I'm just thinking of a marathon, and if I run my first kilometer at, 5 minutes a kilometer, my last kilometer at 10, that's not very smooth. If I have the first year at 2027 at 4.62 and my last year in 2036 at 2.01, that doesn't seem smooth to me. Through Mr. Chair.
Yes, so certainly you're obviously correct, Councillor. Based on the expenditure forecast, this was the timing of the expenditure forecast, this was as smooth as we could get it. So we've used those other financing tools that we have available, like development charges, upfront. The reserves and the reserve funds, for the most part, are upfront, with the exception of the one, which is in the latter part of the forecast, and that is because that financing source that we're using for that particular is particular to a certain area that we have to spend that financing in a particular area, which is why it is out. So we've taken it out in the forecast year, so that we've tried very hard to put all those alternative financing sources up front in order to do that, in order to smooth it as best we can. But I very much recognize the increases are all, or for the most part, are in the first four or 5 years.
So through you, Mr. Chair, you're saying you're bringing up all those alternative methods of funding up front, which should reduce the initial years to a more palatable number?
So these numbers already reflect that action.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Wow. Okay. Thank you. I do have a follow-up question, just to change lanes again, is back to North Division. Chief, had we pretty much outgrown the North Division in 2021?
Yes.
Okay. So forgive me, I think Councillor Chapman would have been a little bit older when that North Division was built, but I think it was 2003 or 4. So you mentioned about concerns being and alarm bells being sounded in around 2003 and 4. Census has us at in Scugog at 21,739. in 2004, and in 2021, census has us at 21,581. So we were actually down residents in Scugog between 2003 when the building was started or completed and 2021. How did we outgrow it with a loss in population through you, Mr. Chair?
Because it's not the only municipality that police station polices, and the others are growing as well. And the complexity of calls.
Okay.
There's no other, like, the North is experiencing the same pressures in terms of response times, call time on scene. There's no relief from it. And in addition to that, they have the same pressures around disclosure. They have the same pressures. All of the same pressures exist. So when I say they've outgrown it, they certainly have outgrown it since I've been here, and I could identify those areas that we should have been making investments. I'll give you a very quick example. The gym is actually in the garage, and we prioritize mental health, physical and mental health of our members. So if somebody suffers a medical episode, it's a possibility that no one sees that happening. That's a concern for me. And so, you know, when we talk about outgrowing, it's outgrowing for the usefulness of the building. There's going to have to be improvements in there, and we're looking at identifying what those are.
Okay, thank you. I do understand, and I would not want to gaslight you in the sense that all of these jobs have become more complex, more officers, more time on the scene, which means you need more staff. I get it. So thank you very much. Thank you all for your time.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Marin-Pietri.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Just to maintain consistency, my questions and comments, I know that they should be considered consistent with the kind of efforts that we've been trying to make for years to advance the capital needs for Durham Regional Police. And I know myself, I trust that these comments and questions will not be offensive to anyone because they've been maintained in the public realm for many years. And I'm going to ask, beginning with the recommendation that's been made public, whether here or to council, whether the chief can express what that means. Because my understanding through you, Chair, is the recommendation is essentially to do nothing, receive and file. Is that something that I'm missing, or is that something that appears to be a concern to DRPS and the proposals that have been put forward in good faith?
Yeah, there's two major points. One is about this deferring. Time is of the essence. We need to get moving. We cannot risk losing another year. I need to get going on RFP. Like, just to get the process started will take me a long time. The second part surrounds the board direction I was given to work with the region about reserves, and that just doesn't appear within the recommendations.
Okay, through you, Chair, you'll know that I've been pressing for many years, and certainly for the time that you've been here as well, to get these capital projects up and running so that we can have the bricks and mortar to deploy the frontline services to our communities. I want to thank you for taking that seriously, because we've had many chiefs that have understood the need, and I know that my understanding, just as recent as last night, there were a number of association members, and for those who don't know what that means, officers who came and acknowledged and expressed their appreciation for our work and the efforts that you're making with the board in working shoulder to shoulder with the association and the needs that we have. So my question to that is, with the kind of understanding that both levels of government, federal and provincial, have in providing law and order and safety and national defense, would you not consider that an approved capital plan would be a better mechanism for us as a region and a taxpayer to be able to afford us those grants, those funding envelopes, that money that otherwise won't be available if you don't approve your plans or your strategy? Through you, Chair.
Yes, in fact, Councillor Marin-Pietri, we have this very concerned right now in terms of how far our talks can go with any of these partner agencies we're looking to partner until we sort of have some understanding. Is this a go or not? Are we wasting our time here? The second thing is, I deliver a regional service, not a municipal one. And so I say that because while we're focusing right now on Oshawa, building a proper Central East police station helps 3 municipalities. We were just in front of Mayor Roy and Whitby Council just last week, or maybe it was this week. All the weeks are blurring into one. And Mayor Roy spoke about the response times when she was in the south part on a ride-along, south part of Whitby, and having to go all the way to North Oshawa. So Oshawa right now, the police station there, police is only about 29% of Oshawa. Clarington does the eastern portion, and Whitby does the northern portion. These also happen to be where the most growth is happening. So a properly built station that is properly staffed in Oshawa can actually help 3 municipalities focus on the growth that they're experiencing. Brooklyn is building, I think they've approved 14,000 homes, I think, in Brooklyn alone in phases. They're bringing power, they're bringing water, there's a ton of resources going into that. And I say this because this is a strategic investment in 3 municipalities because we are a regional service. And that's why this makes sense. This is why we need to move forward on these projects. And when we do this, we're going to find partners who want to partner with us that see value in investing and offsetting some of our costs, particularly around our training facility. I'm very excited that there's huge opportunities there, but we need to get moving. We need to get this approved.
Through you, Chair, I appreciate that answer. And I know I've been very vocal about ensuring that we have a centralized environment where we can provide all of that. And I know that you've been doing work with everyone that would help. And I just want to get to the reality that this is a need, an investment versus a cost. And we're talking about an environment that's ever changing. When people think of defense or they think of law and security, they may think of, I'm just going to go in the lay terms, things getting blown up and people, being abducted. But we're talking cybersecurity, data sovereignty, intelligence. This kind of stuff can't just be stored in rented facilities and portables and, in the back of your trunk. And then we get the calls, you have an inquiry, and you got to go back to 2000 and whatever to figure out, who heard what and why didn't you act. So through you, Chair, would you not consider, the time for action to be now in the simplest of terms? I get that staff have their role. You also have yours, but ultimately it falls on the council to be able to advance and provide for what is safety within our neighborhoods and our community in Canada, in the fastest growing area in all of the country. Would that not be something that would, frame the reality here?
Yes, absolutely. And I can tell you that right now we are working with a number of different agencies, including CBSA, because, in your list, you forgot border security. Sure. That's a huge concern for us in this region, and increasingly so. And so we're looking at partnering, actually giving them some space in our hangar to partner with us to address those security needs, those national security needs, because border integrity is a huge concern right now.
Chief, I just want to ask a few more questions through you to the chair, because through the chair, I hear it from the men and women and the officers that are deploying from the front lines. And the premise of a headquarters shouldn't be lost on us, considering we're sitting in one and not yours, ours. So it becomes a discussion of reality, and that things evolve, and I think that we've had discussions in past. Some have mentioned community centers. I know it was part of a process where we built over $140 million worth of infrastructure in Oshawa in the early 2000s that would cost us probably $2 billion now. So the more we wait, there are challenges that transcend even the health and safety issues. The dollars and cents. Someone is going to have to pay for this. Someone is going to have to do this eventually, and it's going to be at a greater cost. But we're also going to incur. So the question is through you: are we, really in a position to be able to say, "Yep, we've got every tool possible to make sure that the downtowns are safe, your neighborhoods are safe, and the Durham region is a leader." If we don't meet this realistically head on.
While your question, I know, is focused on the capital side of it, I'm going to use the human capital as well. Our people are remarkable. They do incredible, brave work every single day. I'm just so impressed every single day to see how our people deliver police service and keep our community safe. I think that's the last way you're going to see the deterioration that's happening. I'm trying to prevent that from happening. And while we talk about the dollars and cents about these investments, think about the cost and the reputational risk we run as a region for a place to live, to invest in, and to come to for recreation. When, you know, these are the things that will be pointed out in the event that something major happens in this region. And my job is to look to the future, mitigate risk for the organization and for the board, and to make sure that I have the assets necessary to deliver adequate and effective policing. These investments aren't nice to have. They're not vanity projects. They're not Taj Mahals. They are the way business is done today, and we need to build for tomorrow. And that is undeniable, and it must happen.
Chair, the recommendation that the chief would like to see this council entertain.
Oh, sorry, my recommendation?
Yes.
That at finance, that we move, you know, that the finance moves the program, approves our plan and moves it forward to council.
Through your chair, to the chief and the association and everyone involved, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Okay, I apologize, members of council. I have another commitment, so I'm going to ask Mayor Watton to take the chair. But Chief, before I leave, I want to just reference, since you've been here, you've come before us and asked for a number of things, including manpower. Just so, because this meeting's being streamed and the public knows, under your watch, how many additional police officers and people have been hired?
By the end of this year, about 283.
So my note says here, because I was going to preference this question in advance, and they can check, I'll have staff check it so I'm not wrong. But under your guidance, your department has increased by 437 positions since you have been here, and that this council has approved that, increasing the size of the service by 35%. And that happened through your leadership. The chiefs before, when they came to came to council and they made asks, and they did make asks, and you referenced since earlier that there was, during that time, when they were here, it was about 52 officers that were asked for. Council at that time supported those asks, and I want the public, because they're watching this meeting, separating out the capital costs of what you're looking for, to understand that this current council has endorsed all of the requests related to staffing that you've brought forward. Would that be correct?
Chair, I don't have that number in front of me, and that's not the number that I have, but I will take your word for it. I'm in my mind, as you were talking, I'm trying to rack through what the civilian number was. I will say this. Certainly, the board has done their due diligence, and the numbers that we actually need and what the board approved and brought to council are much different. The board working through this and with this promise that we were going to have this 10-year plan that was going to happen every single year, we now have some certainty on what that looks like. But our starting point wasn't where we needed to be for those investments to have the impact it has. But when we have brought it, it has moved forward, and that is a credit to this council, yes.
The other question I'll ask is, reading your document going forward, you have an annualized staffing increase built into that, and the numbers exist. So this increase in officers will continue to increase each and every year for the length of the plan that I read, which went out to 2039? Sorry, I'm going from memory, Chief, I apologize, 2036. So that we will be matching the growth of the region and the growth of the service at the same time. That is what we're trying to do.
That's correct.
Members of council, I do have to apologize. I have I have another event. Because you did such an amazing job at the last meeting, Mayor Watton, you get promoted again. Thank you. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Okay, so moving right along, Councillor Miriam Pietri, were you finished?
And I think we're into the afternoon now. Thank you.
We'll try and speed this up. No. Seriously, Councillor Pettingill, go ahead with your questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good morning. Earlier in our conversation, the issue of alternative funding sources was raised. And Chief, I understand that you couldn't elaborate too much because those conversations are still underway. But then we got a little closer to it. And I think you mentioned Border Patrol, for instance, and I think you mean in sharing a facility. I just wonder if you could speak to the significance of the potential alternative funding that could come to the aid of this of these builds.
It's hard to put a dollar figure on it because we don't know the scope of the project yet. So depending on the facilities and how it's designed and built, we will have greater clarity on just what we can expect from those partnerships. The CBSA, and I did mention that organization. I'm glad you're paying attention to that. That's separate and aside from any funding model. Those are law enforcement partners, if you will, and this is part of our core function. And so,
to me, this is extremely significant. Sorry.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, no, to me, this is extremely significant and really relevant and could aid our financial situation greatly. So, I mean, enhancing this opportunity would be paramount. And I would think at some point during the strategy, sort of a much more clear idea of what this could mean would come our way. Wouldn't that be the case?
Yeah, through the Police Services Board, we would share with them. Obviously, there's a number of different factors that we have to consider in that partnership. But, it could be, something enough to offset some of the major costs that we have maintaining the building for sure.
Yeah, I'd just like to state that I'm very, very much in favor of this. I hope that it's something that really can be used in a wonderful way to the benefit of much of our larger society. So I thank you, and I look forward to the point when these plans become more direct and unknown. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Mayor Foster, I see you're on the list next, but since you've already spoken, I'll move you to the bottom, and we'll go to Councillor Garrod.
It gets a little closer, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
A couple of things, if I can, through you, Chair, to the Chief. Just to get some clarity, Councillor McDougall spoke about North Division, and certainly I've been in the building and appreciate the condition of it and the circumstances those officers work in, as well as staff. You talked about growth. Just need to provide some clarity that much, much like Scugog, Uxbridge isn't growing. It's more like a 0.5%. While I support the idea of rebuilding, I think we need to focus that it's not a matter of growth, albeit with a fabulous downtown now in progress and some bigger buildings that come with that. I think your biggest challenge to the north is more geography than it is about a growing environment.
I'm glad you pointed that out, because right after I answered that question, I realized I should have talked about that. So we talk about COP to POP as a measurement. It's a crude way of talking about it, but COP to geography matters a great deal. And you have to look no further than what happened in Portapique, Nova Scotia, and the after-action report that came out of that mass shooting that happened there. It spoke directly about COP to geography. The geography conspired against the police officers in their response, and it matters a great deal. That's why we've made investments. The other thing, community expectations have changed. I think and I hope that you have seen more police officers in both municipalities on patrol, on bicycles, in the community, forging those relationships. That's important too. That is community policing at its core, and something I think our citizens are increasingly expecting from us, and we're making those investments. I've added more officers there, I've added more supervision, and we are dedicated to being in every single one of our municipalities in a way that where the public can see us, talk to us, and interact.
Appreciate that. Yeah, and we have seen that increase, so thank you. My second point would be where Nicole spoke about the impact of the increase, and that we're bumping up against 10%. The political reality that we're in over the next 7 months is many of us will be knocking on doors and talking about that. And I can just assure you that it is a hot button, obviously, in my area, that if I propose that it's going to be 8, 9, 10%, there's a really good chance that the person coming in behind me will knock on the door and take the opposite view and expect it to be in the 1 or 2% increase, or no increase is what certainly some people in Scugog are campaigning on. If that was to happen, the delays that have frustrated you so to date are going to be much worse, because you'll have another person sitting in this chair who will slash your budgets, slash everybody's budgets, and say, that's just the way it has to be, and that's the mandate that I got. So I just need to be aware of that feedback that we get. So that's the balance that I think FNA and then the committee of the whole is going to be addressing. My last point then would be, through you, Madam Chair, to finance, to say we need to look at how we're going to break out next year's discussions to be able to say, certainly this is what I do when I talk to people now, to say I'm going to get these numbers a little bit wrong, but I think the regional increase, and Nicole, if you're there, could remind me, the regional portion of the increase last year was 1.4, 1.7 outside of policing?
For the 4.8, 1.36 of it was for the region, 3.42 for police, with conservation authorities at 0.02.
Terrific, thank you. And that's a good message to deliver, and that's what I've taken advantage when I speak to people, to be able to say, this is what we've done from all the other regional services, and this is what had to be done to support the police. And what I'd like to see, and again through Madam Chair to the finance group, to say, let's do that in the future. Let's consciously have discussions. I don't care which one comes first. Agree to what the increase will be on the all other services component. Settle on that, sign off on it, approve whatever that number is, and then do it all again for police, so that the messaging is very clear. The chief has said about the complexity, the geography, and so on that we're dealing with. And it makes the messaging so much better that we can deliver that and say, this is why, whatever the increase turns out to be, this is why it's necessary. So I would really look through you, Madam Chair, perhaps to the CAO and then on to finance, to say, let's look consciously at how we can do that in the upcoming budget season.
I'll ask our CAO to respond.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. Yes, that is something that we can look at. Obviously, we have to wait until we know who the chair will be and what those specific powers will be, but we can certainly separate things out farther.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kerr?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank my colleagues for their questions today, and to the Chief and the Commissioner for your responses. This is supposed to be an education and training session, not a decision-making session today. And I can honestly say I'm more educated now than I was at the start. I just have one area of questioning. Much has been made about the growth of Durham Region and the impact it will have on Durham Regional Police Service and its need to grow and accommodate that. What hasn't been mentioned is the impact of that on the region of Durham and the staffing levels thereof. So currently, as I understand it, the headquarters, if you will, of Durham Regional Police is sequestered within this building. Is that correct?
That's right, a diminishing footprint, but yes.
Thank you. And it has been mentioned in the past of the potential savings of having a regional separate headquarters for Durham Regional Police. What hasn't been stated is the potential benefit and cost savings to the region of having this vacated space, and how it will allow the region's growth to take place without necessitating more growth. Are there any numbers that have been considered, and I don't want to put you on the spot if you can't answer this today, Nicole, are there any numbers that have been considered for the cost savings to the region in terms of government services that can be factored into an additional need for the cost savings, as well as the costs that be applied against the new Regional Police Service headquarters?
Thank you, Councillor. I'll ask our CAO to respond.
Certainly, as you know, Councillor, we've undergone and we continue to undergo a significant renovation modernization process within this building. The idea being that it will enable us to shrink our leased space footprint. The costs that are assigned to each department within the building are purely cost recovery. There's not a profit margin there. Certainly, the region would find a use for the space should it be vacated, whether it even be bringing in partner organizations. We have not really looked at that in any detail at this point, but the entire intention of the modernization initiative was that it would enable us to exist within this building for another 25 or 30 years. We did offer DRPS prior to the Chief's arrival an opportunity to participate in that process and have their space included, and that was declined.
Thank you. That's just the point I wanted to raise, to get a holistic approach to the costs and benefits. It'd be just nice to see if that can be factored in. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's the extent of my questions today.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Brenner?
Madam Chair. Chief, we've had a lot of discussion on how things have changed, what could have been, what should have been. I'm curious, when you were hired, when you came on board, what were your expectations as it related to the capital situation of Durham Regional Police Services, in particular to facilities? Because I think that's really the big discussion and the big ticket item. What were your expectations that you had at the time, and I'm sure shared as part of that hiring discussion?
Actually, we talked about a number of things. The board's priorities at the time didn't really lend itself to a capital discussion necessarily at the point I was hired. But once I was here, and what my expectations were, that there was an approved capital plan, like most police services, like most regional services, city services, an approved 10-year capital plan, a forecast, something that was predictable and funded and moving forward. And I quite honestly, I was really alarmed at what I saw. And that's why one of my first orders of business was to begin to move that. We brought ACON in, we began to do a true needs assessment. We didn't just throw a dart at a dartboard and said, that's the number we need, or that's the building, or that's the space. I then began to engage our analytics people to do some academic research and research that helped us plan how this region was going to grow. And then I compared it to our starting point. That's why the investments of people that have happened so far, our members, have been to try to start making up for the gap of 8 years of not hiring. And I know this has been debated, but I assure you, I say it over and over again because it's absolutely true. We did not increase by one net new person. There was no benefit to the organization during those 8 years, zero. And trying to address that gap while the region was growing, while every other department was growing, it meant people first. And I've been trying to work to get this capital moving forward. And each time I do, needs continue to pop up. Priorities continue to shift. We have a plan. This plan actually predates me in terms of what the capital needs were. This was predicted, but there was nothing from in terms of regional council or the region looking at how we finance this. Our plan hasn't changed. What has dramatically changed is the timelines. This is not a 30-year plan. It's not a 20-year plan. That was 20 or 30 years ago. This is now. And the sooner we can get these things built, the cheaper it is for our taxpayers, the more efficiencies we're going to find, and the better service we can deliver.
And I appreciate that, very pointed, very direct, and very important for the public to understand that as well. Chief, what do you see as the consequences if that 10-year plan, which is now 30 years overdue, isn't done?
I see it'll challenge my ability to deliver adequate and effective policing and the board to fulfill its mandate to ensure that that's done. I think we'll lose members. I think we won't attract members here. I think it'll affect morale. I think it'll affect our ability to connect with the communities that we serve because we have no public spaces. I think there are dire consequences. And I haven't even begun to talk about, litigation that may happen as a result. If a board says to the region, this is a mandatory need, and we then have to engage the adjudicator. It's not where I want to go, and I think that there's a pathway for us to plan and to move forward.
Would it be fair to say or to assume that to not go forward, we could very easily find ourselves in conflict with the Police Services Act?
The Community Safety and Policing Act. There could be a dispute, yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brunner. Mayor Foster?
Madam Chair, I've got a dozen or so procedural matters that I'd like to address with you. I don't. Just very quickly.
We'll break for lunch then. Mayor Foster first.
I was hesitant to bring up the moniker of Taj Mahal, but so that everyone understands fully, the Taj Mahal moniker was tongue-in-cheek and probably more bitter than tongue-in-cheek on the facility that predated what was built in Clarington. If you went to that facility today, which is it's a hazardous waste recycling amongst other things, the facility in its state today is about, Councillor Chapman, I'll look at you, about 100 times better than it was at the time. So the point on that is, while there were members of council in debate on building what was built in Clarington, that was desperately needed. And we're getting a sense of what is perhaps desperately needed in other spots. I'm sort of curious, there's been repeated reference to regional council and past police services budget. My memory is brutal. Could we get an indication of when council has denied the budget requests? And this is a genuine. I am not aware, I won't say I'm not aware. I cannot recall, but I'd be curious to.
The point of order would be that the councils have been very clear on where they want to go with things. So is DRPS, and we don't want to get into the criticism that we're only getting this today. We didn't want to go there today because I can, if you want, I can go there if you like, because I know DRPS are just as frustrated as the
So,
public
Madam
are.
Chair, I would ask the councillor to articulate how that fits into a point of order, because I don't see one there. Councillor, I asked the chair something. I believe the chair has the
We'll let Mayor
floor.
Foster continue to determine.
So I think it's a fair question, which, and it's going nowhere other than getting some answers. Madam Chair, thank you. Did not think that was a controversial request. Apparently it was.
So through you, Madam Chair, in the 8 years that I have been there, I don't believe we have denied a DRPS request. And I also should point out that with the exception of this 10-year plan, which I agree we have had for a couple of years, I am not aware of any other 10-year plan coming to council for DRPS. And I will look to Nicole to see if there's anything, if she just nod if I'm correct. Nicole, that's fine.
Yes, so certainly with my tenure at the region, just over 10 years, while we do have presented through part of the budget documents, forecasts, never a comprehensive document like this that outlined a 10-year combined operating and capital forecast. This would be the first that I'm aware of.
Anything further, Mayor Foster?
No, Madam Chair, and that's not. I'm not sure that's where I was going, but I'll have another chat. So thank you.
I personally feel that rehashing where we were 10 years ago isn't going to bring us anywhere closer to where we want to go today. So keep that in mind with your questions. Councillor Marin Pietre.
Madam Chair, I think you've encapsulated exactly where I was going to go with my questions to the chief. And with that comment, I think it's important for us to recognize at the top of the comments made by the chief and the questions that are being asked and the responses provided were a clear indication that many times this particular chief, administration, and board have come to the administration requesting that capital projects be listened to, be dealt with, and action be taken. We're not going to go back into history. What we have today is a clear plan, an understanding of the need, and that's where we need to go from here forward. So if that's something that this council is willing to do, it's up to them. It's up to us. If it's not, then it's going to be up to us to be able to answer as to why, when every possible opportunity has been exhausted, including a detailed and comprehensive method and mechanism that's being presented here today. And I hope and expect that that opportunity is exhausted with a successful path forward, not for us or for just DRPS and the service provided, but for the safety of residents and for the reality that this stuff continues to cost more and more if we delay. And I think that it's important for us to recognize that through you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Crawford?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to confirm next steps. As the report actually says, this will come to Finance on Tuesday, correct? And then to the police board meeting, is that correct? On the 19th. That's the next steps. And that this discussion is to be received for information. Is that right?
That's my understanding.
Okay, and so my question would be at Finance, is this the same report we're going to see? I don't know what's being presented at Finance. Is it the same report? Is it a different report?
There is a staff report that will go to Finance and Admin that you will, if you have not received your agenda yet, it will be out today.
Okay.
It is a very long report. There is a staff cover report, and we have attached to it most of the materials that DRPS has provided to us. So it will be a comprehensive document that will include much of what was presented today. And as I said at the outset, the recommendation, given where we are in the political cycle and governance changes, is to receive for information at this time so that it can be considered with the new council and the new chair.
I'm assuming, Chief, you'll be there?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for all the great discussion today. I think the chief has done an amazing job in explaining exactly the situation that we are in and the dire need to get this 10-year capital forecast moving forward. This has been 2 years, 2 budget cycles in the making. Respectfully, and just to the CEO's opening comments, I mean, I don't think that the election should have any bearing on this at all. This should have been my last year, I would have hoped. But regardless, putting it off another year to the next budget cycle and the next council is not going to make anything any easier. It is not going to move anything forward. These things take time, and the board needs to have this assurance from regional council so we can make these decisions and move forward. I'm very frustrated with the recommendation today, and I reached out to the clerk because I really wanted to amend the receipt for information to be that regional council approves the 10-year capital forecast and sends it to finance. I'm told that's not appropriate because no decisions are being made today, but I really am not ever going to be able to support a receipt for information recommendation at finance either. I hope finance will soundly reject such a recommendation from staff due to the election cycle, because it's always due to something. You know, it was due to the budget cycle. We couldn't have this last year. We're going through the budget. Now we're through the budget. Now we're here. It's always going to be some reason why this keeps getting put off. And that is just not acceptable anymore. It's been done too many times. So if there was a vote today, I would be asking you all to not support the receipt for information, and I'd be moving an amendment for approval. I'm certainly hoping that that is what happens on the finance meeting next week. I will be there and speak with some of the representatives, and hopefully somebody will make that motion. Thank you all for your time again today. I think it was a great conversation.
Thank you, Mayor Collier. Are there any further questions from anyone? Any online? Oh, Councillor Chapman?
Thank you. So Based on what Mayor Collier just said, my question is, what's the difference between approval, receive for information, or approve in principle? Approval means, yeah, hey, this is the way we're moving, but a motion of approval, I know we're not making motions today. I'm talking about because the finance people are listening, they're going to get the first kick at it next Tuesday to approve this in principle, because regardless of what we approve, we've done this with transit strategies and all that sort of stuff. It still comes up to the annual budget as to where we are and how the financing works. So, approval of this or approval in principle is what we do a lot of at the city anyway, so that gives the staff at least some vision into, okay, moving this forward. So I don't know if that's a question or just a point that the FNA committee. Sorry, Chief, why don't you speak up?
I was just going to say, sorry, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Sorry, my apologies. But, we're going to require funds this year. In this,
Yeah, that one piece of it is done. So anyway, thank you, Madam
Thank
Chair. You look good
Councillor
sitting up in that
Chapman.
chair.
Thank you, Chief. My understanding is that if Councillor Wolf, go ahead. Go ahead.
And depending on what you're going to say, I may make a motion, but just want to hear it because you were going to say something.
My understanding, Councillor,
Okay.
there is no motions today.
Okay.
So what I was going to say is that if there were any motions to be changed, that would come to finance first. That's what I was going to say. So, Mayor Foster.
I've got a motion, seeing as I don't see anyone else wanting to speak, and that would be a motion to adjourn.
And we have one item of correspondence to before we break for lunch. And that would be a motion to receive or to direct. And so looking for a motion to receive for information, the correspondence. Councillor Chapman, Councillor Anderson, any comments, questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Back to you, Mayor Foster.
Motion to adjourn, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman, all in favor? Lunch is in the back. Thank you.
Thank you.
No problem. I just have one.